Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel far, far back, to a time when smelling like boiled cabbage and sheep fat was not only accepted, but kinda trendy. You're a medieval woman now, just trying to get by, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. But hey, that's bedtime history, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, no pressure. Also, let me know your city and what time it is where you are, because there's something weirdly cozy about knowing someone else is also winding down at 11:42 PM in like Saskatchewan. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with soap, or rather the complete lack of it. You wake up in a creaky bed stuffed with straw, surrounded by the familiar smells of damp stone, smoke, and a very specific kind of sweat that has fermented into your skin. You stretch, crack your neck, and scratch your shoulder through your woolen shift, which has fused to your body like a second skin. You haven't changed it in weeks, and the notion of washing up is more superstition than sanitation. There is soap in your world, but it's rare, expensive, and usually saved for laundry. Not your laundry, of course, unless you're lucky enough to be a noblewoman, and even then, it's mostly used to freshen linens or rub into the hands after butchering pigs. It smells aggressive, like ashes and animal fat had a baby. Because that's literally what it is. Live from wood ash mixed with rendered animal tallow, boiled into a chunky grey blob that looks like it belongs on the side of a battlefield. But you don't really use soap. Bathing's seen as risky. The church has declared multiple times that too much concern with cleanliness is a form of vanity. And vanity, as everyone knows, is a straight road to hell. In some regions, people believe water can open your pores and let in bad humours, demons, or even the plague itself. You've heard rumours about a woman in the next village who washed twice in 1 week and died 3 days later. Coincidence? No one thinks so. You do rinse occasionally, of course. A quick splash from the well, or a communal rinse in a stream if it's warm enough outside, but it's more about cooling off than scrubbing. There's no soap involved, maybe a handful of crushed thyme or lavender if you're feeling fancy or recently stepped in something suspicious. You have, once or twice, visited a bathhouse. That's considered acceptable, sort of. In bigger towns, public bathhouses exist, usually run by women and attended by both genders, though not always together unless things are getting very social. You remember slipping into one once with a friend, sitting in a huge wooden tub full of warm water. It felt sinful, wonderful, a kind of full-body exhale, but halfway through you caught a whiff of the water and realised that at least 10 other people had used it before you. There were things floating, undeniable things. Still, the heat was nice. The truth is, cleanliness in your time isn't about being clean in the modern sense. It's about being spiritually clean. That means confession, fasting, and staying modest. A clean soul is far more important than a clean body. You wear a wimple and veil to keep your hair hidden, not just from lustful eyes, but from lice and filth. If you're especially devout, you might rub your skin with herbs on holy days, or wash your feet before entering a church, but nothing more. And here's a fun little twist of history. The concept of not bathing as virtuous doesn't come out of nowhere. During the earlier Roman era, public bathing was common and elaborate. But over time, as the Roman Empire faded and the church's influence grew, baths became linked with immorality. Too many naked bodies in one place, too much temptation. And so bathing started to fall out of fashion, not just because of superstition, but because it was politically and religiously discouraged. Still, some scholars argue the whole medieval people never bathed thing is exaggerated. There are records of regular bathing rituals, especially among the upper classes, but those baths weren't daily or even weekly, more like seasonally when the mood or smell struck. And of course, the working class rarely had the luxury. If you're poor, you bathe when it rains and hope no one's watching. One time, your cousin swears she made a soap out of goat fat and lye and used it to wash her hair. She smelled like a roasted dinner plate for 2 days. Her scalp also peeled. She never tried it again. You try not to think about your own hair. It's under your veil, braided tightly. Oiled with something that might be olive-based, or might just be kitchen grease. You use a bone comb to scratch out lice in the evenings, holding the comb over a candle to watch them sizzle. It's oddly satisfying. As you walk through your day, the smell of other women mixes with your own. A broth of body odour, wood smoke, dung smoke, baked bread, and herbal tinctures worn as perfume. It's not pleasant by modern standards, But to you it's comforting, familiar, the smell of survival. So no, you don't have a bar of Dove in your satchel, you don't have body wash or shampoo or deodorant or even the concept of those things. You have cold water, vague anxieties about demons, and a society that has somehow convinced you that spiritual purity matters more than whatever's growing between your toes. Still, you press on. You're a woman in a world that doesn't expect you to be clean, just obedient, pious, and slightly less smelly than the livestock, which on some days is a stretch. And if you happen to run into a travelling merchant who's selling some foreign bar of mystery soap wrapped in linen and marked with Arabic script, you'll definitely sniff it, but only once. Anything that exotic must be dangerous, or expensive, probably both. So you tuck it back under the table, wipe your hands on your skirt and walk away, swearing you'll wash them someday. You own one dress, maybe two, if your family's been particularly blessed this year or if someone died and left you their nice frock. But most days it's just the one. Thick wool faded from what was once a respectable maroon to something between mud and dried blood. It's scratchy, heavy and absolutely without question filthy. Not just dirty in the I wore it to brunch and spilled soup way. We're talking multiple months of body oils, cooking splashes, farm muck, and menstrual accidents soaked into the threads like a biography written in stains. You sleep in this dress, you cook in it, you tend goats in it, you argue with your neighbours in it. You do everything in it except go to church, and even then you just toss on a cloak and maybe brush off the dried egg yolk. The idea of changing outfits daily? That's for queens and saints. And even queens have a cell. This isn't to say you're lazy or careless, it's just how life works. Washing clothes is a serious event, not something you casually do after dinner. It takes time, effort, and most annoyingly, water that has to be drawn, heated, and dumped somewhere afterward. And soap? Ha! Soap is still that elusive block of pungent sadness we talked about earlier, mostly reserved for ceremonial linens or the rare christening robe. So your dress just accumulates. And weirdly, it starts to feel more like armour than clothing. Each crusted layer is a reminder of what you've lived through. Last month's fever, last week's sheep birth, this morning's stew accident. You don't wear your life, you carry it. On your sillon, in your hems, underneath your dress, there's a shift. A long undergarment made of linen if you're lucky, or scratchy homespun if you're not. That shift, it's technically what's supposed to protect your dress from getting too filthy. You laugh thinking about that now, since the shift itself hasn't seen clean water in over a fortnight. It clings to your body like wet parchment soaked through with every drop of sweat you've shed since late spring. Some women have adopted clever tricks to keep their dresses fresh, and by that you mean less horrifying. A few hang their gowns near the hearth so the smoke absorbs the smell. Others stuff dried herbs like lavender, rosemary or pennyroyal into their sleeves or the folds of their skirts. It doesn't erase the smell, it just layers it. Like spraying perfume on a raccoon. You remember once watching a wealthier woman walking past in town, her gown sweeping dramatically through the muddy streets. She smelled like rosewater and cloves. For a brief second you thought she might be royalty, until you saw the lice scuttling along her veil and realised, same problems, fancier packaging. But there is something powerful about this one dress system. You know it intimately. Every fray, every patched hole, every odd crusted spot that won't come out no matter how much you scrub. You once caught your reflection in a piece of polished pewter and realised the dress had moulded to your shape in a way that made it feel like a second skin. A dirty, damp, occasionally itchy skin, but still. The weight of it is constant. When it rains, the wool soaks up water like a sponge, nearly doubling in weight. You trudge through mud with it clinging to your thighs like cold hands. In summer, it bakes in the sun, holding heat and sweat against you like a woolen oven mitt. In winter, it ices over around the hem, freezing solid if you've been outside too long. There are moments, usually when you're picking lice from your cuffs or catching a waft of underarm rot, that you wonder what it must be like to wear something fresh. Something that doesn't carry the scent of last season's illnesses, but you shove the thought aside. Nostalgia for fantasy is dangerous. Women who daydream too much end up accused of witchcraft, or worse, running off with the minstrel. Your dress might be disgusting, but it's yours, and more importantly, it tells the world who you are. Colour and cut still matter in your time, even if you're only washing it once a season. Darker shades are a sign of wealth, dyes like woad madder or cochineal don't come cheap. You once tried to dye your shift with onion skins and ended up looking like you'd rolled in a swamp for 3 days. Which, well, to be fair, you had. Even the length of your sleeves can be political. Long trailing ones? That's nobility. Short sleeves with ragged edges? That's I wrestle pigs before breakfast energy. You try to keep yours somewhere in between, though your right cuff has a permanent grease stain that no one in the village dares mention anymore. Fringe fact, con. In some wealthier medieval communities, sumptuary laws existed, basically legal dress codes. They told women what materials they couldn't wear, based on their social rank, like, no velvet for you, peasant, go back to your goat blanket tunic, as if the goats would share. Scholars do debate how rigid these rules actually were, though. Some believe that peasant women occasionally managed to sneak fancy bits into their wardrobes, lace stolen from a dying aunt, or a sleeve trimmed with fabric traded at a market. Others argue that poor women wouldn't even want the trouble, since standing out could be dangerous. If people start thinking you're above your station, they start looking for reasons to pull you back down. Hard. But here you are, trudging through the muck, sweat pooling in the small of your back, the stench of onions and unwashed wool radiating around you like a medieval force field. You pass the baker, who smells somehow worse than you, and the blacksmith's wife, whose dress is burned in 3 places and dotted with grease. Misery loves company, and so does bad hygiene. Eventually, you reach the village square. You gather with other women, all equally fragrant, all wearing their own versions of the one sacred dress. There's something strangely comforting about it. You're all equally gross, equally human, and no one is judging, because judging requires options. Still, in the quiet moments, when you lift your arms and smell what you've become, you do wonder what life might be like if you had 3 dresses, maybe even 4, clean ones, starched, pressed, smelling like lavender instead of your armpits. But that's for the afterlife, probably. For now, your dress carries your story, one stink layer at a time. Your hair itches. Again, it always itches. You could be in the middle of a feast, a prayer, or even a funeral, and you'll still find yourself sneaking a scratch under your veil. And the worst part? You know exactly what's crawling around up there. Lice, fleas, maybe. The occasional mystery bug that probably has a Latin name and a vendetta. But the real tragedy isn't that your scalp is a thriving insect metropolis. It's that washing your hair is seen as borderline dangerous. Possibly immoral, at best unnecessary, at worst a sure path to ruin. You sit in your dimly lit cottage, fingers raking through your matted braids. Your hair is long, thick, and tangled into ropes from weeks, maybe months, without a proper wash. The oil from your scalp has turned the roots stiff and shiny, like someone painted them with mutton fat. Which they kind of were at one point. You remember trying that old village trick, boiled sheep fat mixed with rosemary to nourish the scalp. Spoiler, it just made your hair smell like a meat stew left out in the sun. But here's the kicker. In your world, washing your hair too often is believed to be unhealthy. There's a common fear that water, especially hot water, opens up your head to illness, literally. People say it invites bad humours, or allows the devil himself to slither in through your ears. You've overheard old women scolding girls for washing too frequently, whispering that too much cleanliness weakens the soul. The irony doesn't escape you as you yank a louse off your temple and flick it into the hearth. So instead of washing, you comb, endlessly. You own one comb carved from the bone, handed down by your mother, who got it from her mother. It's smooth and pale, the teeth worn down from decades of lice duty. Every night you sit by candlelight and pull it slowly through your hair, starting at the ends, working your way up, holding your breath when it snags. Sometimes you pass the comb over a flame to burn off whatever you just caught. It sizzles, you feel vindicated, and slightly nauseated. To manage the itch and keep your hair looking vaguely presentable, you coat it with whatever's available. Rendered fats, herbal oils, or vinegar rinses if you're feeling bougie. There's a concoction going around the village right now, egg yolk mixed with ale and sage. You're not brave enough to try it after what happened to Martha. She tried it last week, left it in too long, and now her hair smells like a compost heap that's been doused in beer. Still, the idea of running your head under clear water is strangely alluring. You remember once, during a freak summer storm, you stood outside in the rain, hair loose, face turned skyward. The water was cold and clean. It ran down your neck, your shoulders, into your shift. For a brief moment you felt reborn. Then your neighbour screamed that you'd catch a chill and die, and you were back inside, dripping guilt and water on the rush-covered floor. But the truth is, few women in your time wash their hair with water more than a couple of times a year, maybe during a religious festival or a rare bathhouse visit. Even then, they often avoid soaking their heads, fearing it'll cause headaches, madness, or hair loss. And there's real risk. Without today's shampoos, rinsing your hair with untreated water can make things worse. The water's full of bacteria. The combs are shared. The drying takes hours, sometimes days. And if it's cold out, you might freeze before your hair dries. Instead, head coverings are the go-to solution. As a respectable woman, you rarely show your hair in public anyway. You wear a linen coif or veil, sometimes a wimple that wraps around your head and neck, and you pin it all in place with dull iron pins that occasionally stab your scalp. Fashionable, yes. Breathable? Not remotely. Your head is a greenhouse for parasites. Every now and then someone claims to have found a miracle solution. This week it's goose grease mixed with ash. Last month it was boiled nettles. A travelling monk once swore by a mixture of stale wine and rabbit brains. You didn't try that one. Mostly because you like rabbits and wine. Fun fact, rosemary and vinegar rinses actually do help a little. Some noble women use them regularly. Of course that requires owning enough rosemary to spare and not needing the vinegar for preserving vegetables. So for you it's mostly theoretical. You dream about it sometimes, the way other women dream of romantic ballads or new shoes. There is a fascinating little fringe belief making rounds among the older village women. They say that not only does hair washing invite demons, but that combing too often can stir memories best left buried. Apparently your scalp is the seat of memory and intuition. The more you fuss with it, the more likely you are to awaken things. Ghosts, secrets, maybe your past lives. You're not sure whether to laugh or start combing faster. Scholars today still argue about how frequently medieval women really tended to their hair. Some believe the upper classes had elaborate grooming rituals, including weekly washes, perfumed oils, and professional hairdressers. Others say that's wishful thinking romanticised by later eras. There's more evidence for hair being plaited, oiled, covered, and then mostly ignored. A set-it-and-forget-it approach. Which makes sense. You have bread to bake, goats to wrangle, and a 6-year-old cousin who keeps trying to ride the chicken. So each night, you sit by the fire, run your comb through your aching scalp and watch tiny shadows flicker across the stone walls. Your hair is thick, alive in all the wrong ways and quietly plotting against you. But it's yours. And in a world where not much is, your name, your body, your choices, that means something. You tuck a fresh sprig of thyme into your veil and tell yourself it smells better than it does. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Maybe the rosemary trick, maybe not. Maybe you'll just braid it tighter and pray the bugs stay asleep a little longer. Your mouth tastes like boiled turnips and regret. You wake up with it, thick, sour, slightly metallic, and go to sleep with it, even after a full day of chewing parsley or biting into roasted garlic cloves to freshen things up. Your teeth ache. Several are loose. You think one might be moving on its own. But what are your options, really? There are no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no floss, just your fingers, a twig, and an entire belief system that says your mouth is more about spiritual purity than dental hygiene. You shuffle to the hearth, scoop some ashes from last night's fire, and dip your chewed stick into the grey dust. The stick, your makeshift toothbrush, is from a hazel tree. Or maybe it's elder. You can't tell anymore. The end has been frayed by your own teeth, gnawed into soft bristles. It's the medieval equivalent of a free sample-sized toothbrush, minus the minty freshness and plus a whole lot of splinters. You scrape at your molars, wincing as you hit a tender spot. There's something lodged back there. Maybe a barley husk, maybe a shard of yesterday's crust. You gag a little, then spit into the fire. The ash and saliva combo hisses like it's judging you. It probably is. Oral care in your world is both oddly attentive and completely ineffective. People do try. There are herbal rinses made from sage, vinegar, or wine. Chewing aromatic sticks is common. Fennel, licorice root, even yarrow. You've even heard of people rubbing crushed mint and salt directly into their gums, hoping to cure bad breath and keep the toothworms away. Yes, toothworms. That's the reigning theory. If your tooth hurts, it's not rot or decay. It's because a tiny invisible worm has burrowed in and is wriggling around your enamel like it owns the place. You're not sure if that's true, but it would explain the weird pulsing pain in your left canine. There's a travelling apothecary who swears he can remove the worm by smoking it out. You lie back, let him blow burnt henbane into your mouth, and then bite down on a leather strap while he pokes your gum with an iron pick. You black out before he finishes. When you wake, the pain's still there, plus a new hole, but no worm. So that's something. You have to laugh at how much effort you put into your mouth, considering you only have about 22 teeth left. The front ones are mostly intact, though yellowed to the colour of old parchment. The back ones are either chipped, hollowed out, or missing entirely. One of your cousins, only 30 and already gummy, swears by clove oil. Another swears by whiskey. You suspect neither is a long-term solution. Quirkier remedies pop up now and then. Someone once told you to boil a frog, grind its bones, and rub the powder on your gums. Someone else suggested carrying a dead mouse in your mouth for 5 minutes every new moon. You passed on that one, despite the enthusiasm with which it was recommended. And still, for all the rotten grime, smiles are important. Not for beauty necessarily, but for showing you're alive, functional, and not contagious. Toothless women are either pitied or feared. Pity if you're old, fear if you're young. People assume you've either sinned, cursed someone, or made a deal with something you shouldn't have. You glance at your reflection in a pewter dish filled with water. Your gums are red and inflamed. There's a small abscess forming on the lower left side. You press it gently and watch pus bubble up. You gag again. There's no dentist. There's just you, a hot poker if things get bad, and a prayer that you won't die of septic shock in your sleep. Strangely though, there's a kind of peace in the routine. You chew the stick, you scrub with ash. You rinse with wine or salt water if you can spare it. You wrap a cloth around your finger and massage your gums until they stop bleeding or you lose consciousness, whichever comes first. Then you spit, swish, and move on with your day. You've heard rumours, probably exaggerated, of noble women with ivory toothpicks tipped in gold. They sit at banquets and delicately scrape roast goose from between their teeth like queens of hygiene. You try to imagine what that would feel like. Clean breath, teeth that don't ache, gums that don't leak. You'd probably cry or faint or immediately get accused of sorcery. There's an open debate among historians today about just how bad medieval oral hygiene really was. Some argue that without sugar in the average diet, teeth were actually in decent shape, less decay, fewer cavities. But others point out that the coarse bread, gritty grains, and lack of soft, processed foods meant that teeth wore down faster and cracked more easily. Plus, infections were common and almost always fatal if they spread. So, win some, lose some. You remember hearing about a woman, Isolde, you think, who had all her upper teeth removed with a chisel after an infection got into her jaw. She survived, sort of, ate nothing but broth for years, never smiled again. They say she had a lovely singing voice, though, before. The weirdest part, you still get compliments on your breath. You chew cloves or parsley before big gatherings, and people genuinely think it helps. It doesn't, of course, everyone stinks. It's just a matter of degree. You once caught a whiff of the blacksmith's breath and almost passed out. You think he's been fermenting something in his lungs. But in your world, personal scent is layered. It's not just your mouth, it's your whole body, your clothes, your surroundings. No one smells clean, so no one really notices. Bad breath becomes normal, expected. And if someone doesn't smell bad, you get suspicious. What are they hiding? A secret lover? A pact with a demon? Access to running water? You finish your morning routine, ash, chew, stick, rinse, and a few desperate finger swipes, and call it good enough. Your teeth are still wobbly, but at least they're all, mostly, still in your head. You smile at the cat. She blinks slowly, then turns away like she's offended. Fair. And as you wrap a scarf around your head and head out into the smoky morning air, you take one last swig of weak wine, swish it around your mouth and spit it into the dirt. The colour is alarming. You decide not to think about it. It's probably fine. Everything is probably fine. You know it's bad when you can smell yourself before anyone else does. That moment, halfway through kneading dough or mucking out the chicken coop, when a breeze hits just right and bam, there it is. The rich fermented bouquet of sweat, stale wool, and something vaguely sour you can't quite place. Maybe goat, maybe despair. Either way, you know it's time for perfume, or what passes for perfume in your medieval corner of the world. You head to the table near the hearth where your prized little vial sits, carefully corked and only half full. It's your one luxury. Not really perfume, more like floral water, which sounds better than it smells. You dab some on your wrist and immediately regret it. The scent hits you like a bouquet that's been dunked in sour milk and buried in damp hay. But to your nose, conditioned as it is to livestock, feet and soot, it's practically divine. Perfume, in your world, isn't just about smelling nice. It's about masking what's inevitable. Body odour is constant, overwhelming and socially acceptable to a point. But there's still a silent understanding, especially among women, that you who try. You don't walk into church reeking like cheese left on a windowsill in July. Know you prepare, you dab yourself with scented oils, sprinkle your shift with dried herbs, and maybe even chew something mildly pleasant before entering sacred spaces. Today you've gone with a rosewater and goat fat blend. Homemade, obviously. You know someone who once stole actual perfume from a noblewoman's chamber, and apparently it was made of ambergris, yes, whale vomit, and musk harvested from glands of some now endangered beast. Yours, rose petals boiled in well water, left to ferment in a sealed jar with a chunk of lard. It's been steeping for 3 weeks. You like to pretend it smells floral, but mostly it reminds you of rancid butter with dreams of elegance. The truth is, medieval perfume is less chemistry and more alchemy. There's no concept of top notes or base layers. There's just trial, error, and the hope that you won't pass out mid-prayer because you accidentally rubbed fermented lavender on your temples again. Scented sachets are another trick. You keep one tucked into your upper bodice. A small cloth pouch filled with dried herbs like marjoram, mint, and meadowsweet. It sits close to your chest, slowly baking against your skin all day, mingling its gentle fragrance with your natural musk. You open it sometimes and breathe deeply, as if to reassure yourself that something in your life still smells like hope. There's a theory, whispered mostly among older women, that different scents can ward off illness. You remember the plague years, not clearly, but enough to still flinch when someone coughs too hard. People stuffed their sleeves with herbs then, carried posies, held sweet-smelling cloths to their noses. It wasn't about romance, it was about survival. Because death, they said, travels on bad air. You once tried making a perfume with crushed violets, cider vinegar and honey. It smelled like funeral wine. A travelling merchant told you that in the East women bathe in milk and oil, and their skin smells like almonds and light. You nodded politely while trying not to itch the flea bite under your chin. Some women go more animalistic. You've heard of perfumes made from deer musk, civet oil, even beaver castoreum. Yes, from their glands. The pungent, lingering smell is said to attract men, though you have to wonder what kind of men are swayed by something that smells like a feral trap. Then again, in a world without showers, the bar is subterranean. And speaking of men, don't assume they smell better. They don't. In fact, most of them smell worse. Their version of perfume is ale, sweat, and pipe smoke. They might rub garlic on themselves before battle, convinced it brings courage. You think it just repels literally everyone. But as a woman, especially one of childbearing age, you're expected to make an effort. You're judged by how you smell, even if only subconsciously. A good-smelling wife is a healthy wife, a fertile wife. A wife who can walk into the marketplace without making children cry. There's one memory you keep tucked away. You were maybe 12, following your aunt to the midsummer festival. She wore a pale green dress, threadbare but clean, and had dabbed herself with a mix of lavender and lemon balm steeped in goat's milk. It was the first time you thought a human could smell beautiful, like something alive and blooming. She danced that night with a butcher who smelled like onions and blood. They married that winter. It's not all science and sweat, though. Some of the perfumes have a spiritual edge. Monasteries grow herbs specifically for distillation. Holy waters infused with rose, frankincense, and juniper, believed to protect the soul and purify the body. You've tasted one by accident. It burned. A lot. You've also heard of women wearing specific scents to seduce. A pinch of saffron oil behind the ear. A trace of cinnamon on the wrists. Of course, saffron is worth more than your entire wardrobe, so your version involves crushed cloves and a silent prayer that no one notices the flea bites. There's an open question among historians today about whether medieval women actually used scent as a social tool, or if that's just romantic hindsight. Some records suggest regular herbal infusions and distillations, especially among wealthier households. Others argue that for most women the goal wasn't seduction or beauty, it was basic hygiene theatre. Like spraying perfume on a dying corpse and calling it a resurrection, still as you walk through the village, sachet tucked into your shift, hair braided tightly and lightly scented with vinegar, you hold your head high. You smell tolerable, maybe even nice in a rustic sort of way. The baker's apprentice sneezes as you pass. You take it as a compliment. Tonight, before bed, you'll uncap your rose goat perfume, dab a drop behind your ears, and pretend you're a duchess in a stone tower with a bath and a servant named Isadora. But until then, you'll keep layering rosemary on top of sweat, marjoram over mildew, and hope no one gets too close. Because that's medieval perfume, a fantasy built on fat flowers and denial. There's no nice way to say this. Your period is a medieval nightmare. There are no pads, no tampons, no hot water bottles or Midol, no discreet wrappers or heated blanket burrito days, just blood, linen, prayer, and thus hope that no one notices you've been waddling like a duck for the past 2 days. When it comes hard like a tidal wave with a grudge, and you, unprepared and deeply cursed, do what medieval women have always done. You improvise. You wake up to the familiar, awful warmth. Not cozy warmth. The other kind. The kind that makes you go cold with dread even as your stomach cramps twist like they're trying to perform some dark magic. You shift uncomfortably in your straw-stuffed mattress. Already knowing what's happened before you reach down, your shift is damp, your thighs are sticky. Somewhere in your gut, something is actively trying to murder you. And now, it's time to get creative. You grab the menstrual rags. They're coarse linen strips, reused endlessly, washed only semi-thoroughly and bleached in the sun when you can manage it. You fold them into thick pads and stuff them between your legs, tying them in place with a cloth belt that chafes your hips. The rig is uncomfortable, bulky, and barely functional. Walking feels like you've got a loaf of bread tucked between your knees. Sitting, forget it. One wrong move and the entire system shifts, leaks, or, God help you, falls out. You've heard of women using moss. Yes, actual moss. It's absorbent, sure, but itchy. There's a particular kind, soft, velvety, usually found near rivers, that works best. You once tried to harvest some, but ended up with a rash and 3 embedded insect larvae. Another woman swears by wool scraps soaked in vinegar, while an old midwife claims rabbit fur is the way to go. You don't ask questions, you just try to stay upright. The pain is the other issue. The cramping, the bloating, the backache that feels like a blacksmith is hammering your spine. There's no such thing as menstrual leave. You still have to bake, sweep, sew, and tend to everything short of a small war while trying not to faint. You chew dried yarrow for the cramps. It helps a little. You've also tried fennel tea and lying on a heated brick, but neither makes you feel like anything other than a bleeding disaster wrapped in fatigue. The worst part? No one talks about it. Not really. You learn the basics from older women, your mother, your aunt, maybe the midwife if she's in a good mood, but it's all whispered, hushed. Your first period was a terrifying ordeal. You thought you were dying, bleeding out from the inside. You ran to your mother, wailing, convinced your internal organs had ruptured. She looked tired and handed you a strip of cloth and a shrug. Now it's just routine, a miserable, blood-soaked, soul-crushing routine. There's also the smell. Sorry. But yes, the rags reek after a day or 2. You try to rinse them discreetly, hang them behind the cottage where the sun hits best. But even then, there's a tang in the air that no amount of lavender can mask. Some women burn their used rags rather than wash them. Others bury them near sacred trees, convinced it'll keep the bleeding regular. You once met a girl who claimed tying a chicken feather to her ankle shortened her period. You wore one for 3 months. It did absolutely nothing except make you itch. Religion doesn't help. If anything, it makes things worse. You're considered unclean during your cycle, spiritually impure. You can't take communion, you can't kneel on certain days. Some churches even bar women from entering during their unclean time. You once watched a girl get turned away from Mass by a priest who could sense the devil's flow upon her. You didn't attend that church again, or that priest's funeral. Not that you had anything to do with it, obviously. There's a strange power in menstruation, though. Old stories say it can kill crops, sour milk, or ward off evil. One tale claims that if a menstruating woman walks through a battlefield, all the wounded men will die instantly. Another says your blood can curse someone if poured into their drink. You keep that one in your back pocket just in case. Some older women, healers and midwives, collect their blood intentionally. They smear it on bark or dry it into powder to use in fertility spells or anti-curse rituals. You're not sure if it's superstition or desperation, but you once met a healer who claimed she used her period blood to keep her husband faithful. He left her for a sheep herder, but the story lives on. Modern historians still argue about how medieval women really dealt with their periods. Some insist that the average medieval cycle was lighter and shorter due to poor nutrition and constant pregnancy. Others point to records of elaborate cloth wrappings, belts, and even primitive tampon-like devices made from wool or wood wrapped in linen. That last one, you sincerely hope is a myth, because the idea of inserting anything splintery up there makes your uterus scream in protest. There's also speculation that women simply bled into their clothes, freely. No padding, no fuss, just let it flow and deal with the stains later. You tried that once. It was summer. You were 12, and you sat on a wooden bench at a village meeting. The stain remained there for years. People called it the red seat. You avoided that bench like it was cursed. Still, there's a grim sort of camaraderie in it. When you and the other women sync up, though no one calls it that, obviously, you exchange exhausted glances across the field or hearth, and you know, the slow walk, the grimace, the subtle shift of weight from foot to foot. It's a secret language of shared suffering, one that crosses every boundary, class, age, even religion. You bleed, therefore you suffer. Tonight you'll sleep with an extra rag, a bit of meadowsweet tucked under your pillow, and your legs slightly raised in a futile attempt to avoid soaking through the straw again. You'll wake up sore, damp and cranky. Maybe you'll bleed for 5 days, maybe 7. No one really tracked it. You just wait until it stops, then start counting until it begins again. And when it's over, you'll rinse the rags, hang them in the sun, say a small prayer that next month is lighter, and go right back to pretending you're fine, because you're a medieval woman. And bleeding for a week without dying is just part of the job description. Let's talk about your bathroom situation. Or more accurately, the complete and horrifying lack of one. Because as a medieval woman, when nature calls, you're not walking down the hall to a porcelain throne. Oh no, you're heading outside, possibly to the edge of a field behind a bush into a chamber pot, or, on a really lucky day, into a communal pit latrine with flies, questionable footing, and the distinct risk of encountering someone else's business before you've taken care of your own. You feel the need mid-morning. Not surprising, you had a little too much barley stew last night and followed it with that sketchy ale your uncle brewed in a cracked jug. Now your stomach gurgles ominously. You slip out the back door of your cottage, holding the hem of your dress so it doesn't drag in anything regrettable, and make your way behind the goat shed. That's your usual spot. Well-worn earth, a few scraggly bushes for modesty, and hopefully no one watching. You squat, you aim, you pray. It's not glamorous. You try to keep your dress from falling forward, which it always threatens to do at the worst moment, and you keep an eye out for rats, not out of paranoia but experience. One jumped out at your cousin last week. She screamed so loud the priest came running. There's no wiping, really. If you're lucky, you have a bit of cloth, probably old, reused, and rough as bark. Otherwise it's leaves, or moss, or snow if it's winter and you hate yourself. You wipe quickly, adjust your belt and get out there before anyone walks by. You hope the chickens didn't see too much. If you're in a larger town, you might have access to a public latrine, a small semi-enclosed structure over a trench. It smells like sin, rotting waste, damp wood and human defeat, but at least it's covered. Sometimes there are benches with holes cut out, and you do your business in a line next to other women, pretending you're not all slowly weeping inside. The sound of splashing below is something you never quite get used to. Richer households might have garderobes. Sounds fancy, right? It's basically a wooden toilet seat built into a wall with a chute that empties into the moat or a cesspit below. Convenient, unless you happen to walk under it at the wrong time. You heard of a poor lad who was knocked unconscious by flying waste during a festival. He survived. Kind of. He doesn't talk much anymore. And of course there are chamber pots, ubiquitous, foul-smelling, dangerously sloshy chamber pots. You keep one by the bed, mostly for nighttime emergencies. Nothing says romance like rolling over at 2 a.m, hiking up your shift and peeing into a cold ceramic bowl while your sister snores 2 feet away. You always pray the cat doesn't knock it over. Again. Chamber pots get emptied in the morning, ideally into a dung heap or a designated waste ditch. But let's be honest, half the time they're dumped straight into the street. It's called gong farming, and while it sounds whimsical, it's basically the art of flinging poop out your window and yelling "Gardez l'eau," French for "watch out for the water." Spoiler, it's not water. If you're walking through a medieval town and you hear someone shout that, run. The stench of open waste isn't just gross. It's deadly. You've heard of the miasma theory, the belief that bad smells cause disease. It's not entirely wrong. Waste attracts flies, rats and infections that sweep through towns like whispers from hell. Cholera, dysentery, the good old Black Death, all encouraged by bad sanitation and worse luck. There's no sewer system, no plumbing, and no one with a degree in waste management. There are gong farmers, actual men hired to shovel out cesspits when they get full. It's the lowest job on the social ladder. You'd rather be a leper, honestly, but they get paid well. Danger pay, probably. They wear leather boots, tie cloths around their faces, and disappear into pits full of decades-old human waste armed with shovels and sheer willpower. Back in your world, you're doing your best. You toss ash over your usual spot behind the goat shed to cover the smell. You might even sprinkle some dried rosemary if you're feeling fancy. You once tried digging a private pit, but your brother kept tripping into it and your mother said it offended the spirits. So now it's just open-air privacy and lightning reflexes. Men don't have it any easier, but they do have the advantage of directional plumbing. You've seen them duck behind trees, walls, carts, anywhere, really. You have to find privacy, balance, and modesty all at once, and do it in a dress so long it doubles as a medieval curtain. You've developed quadriceps of steel from all the squatting. Sometimes, when it's late and quiet and you've got a moment to yourself, you imagine what it must be like to have a real toilet. Something clean, with a door, maybe even something that flushes. You heard a traveller once talk about a palace in Arabia with indoor plumbing. You thought he was lying until he described it in such vivid detail you almost wept. A room just for that, a whole room. But here, now, there's just you, the earth, and your own bodily shame. You glance at the cloth belt around your waist, part of your emergency period kit, and think about how ridiculous it is that this is the best the world has come up with. You do your business, stand up, brush the leaves from your skirt, and walk away with dignity. Or at least the medieval approximation of it. Historians still debate how much emphasis was placed on sanitation in various parts of the medieval world. Monasteries were surprisingly hygienic. Many had running water and semi-functional latrines. Some cities had regulations, even designated dumping hours. But in smaller villages like yours, it's every woman for herself, and the chickens. Tonight, before bed, you'll empty the chamber pot, rinse it with stale beer or vinegar if you can spare it, and hope that no one sleepwalks into it again. You'll tuck it back under the bed and lie there, knowing full well that by morning it'll be full again. It always is. You close your eyes and try to imagine a world with plumbing, but all you see is that bush behind the goat shed, gently swaying in the breeze, your throne, your confessional, your private hell. It's bedtime finally. Not that you get to sleep alone, or in anything that resembles comfort. In fact, as you climb into the shared family bed, you instinctively brush your hand over the straw-stuffed mattress, checking for fleas. You find 3. You kill 2. 1 escapes. You'll see it again later, probably at 2 a.m, mid-bite, right on your ankle. Your bed is a chaotic pile of limbs and smells. You share it with your sister, your youngest brother, and occasionally your grandmother when her back is acting up. That's not counting the cat who sleeps wherever she wants, and the dog who has claimed the foot of the bed like a furry, farting guard. Privacy? It doesn't exist. Modesty? Laughable. Personal space? A myth perpetuated by spoiled nobles and travelling bards. You wiggle into your spot, careful not to disturb anyone, and lie flat on your back, arms tight to your sides. There's no room for sprawling. One wrong move and you'll elbow someone's nose or get a foot to the ribs. The warmth is overwhelming. Bodies pressed together, all breathing the same recycled air, wrapped in a shared woolen blanket that smells like sweat, mildew, and faintly of potatoes. There's comfort in it, weirdly, like being buried in a pile of half-clean laundry. But the bugs are always here. You can feel them the moment you settle in. The tiniest skitter across your collarbone, a gentle nibble at your knee. You flinch, reach under the blanket and squish something. Your fingers come back slightly damp. You don't think about it too hard. You learned long ago that sanity requires selective ignorance. Lice are your closest companions. They live in your hair, your clothes, your bedding. You comb them out daily, burn them by candlelight, only to find new ones by dusk. They're resilient little monsters. You've named a few. You joke about them with the neighbour girls. It's a shared trauma, passed down like jewellery. Then there are the fleas. Smaller, jumpier, sneakier. They seem to live just for the thrill of biting your softest, least reachable spots, under the arms, behind the knees, on your scalp. You once saw a flea leap from your dog onto your baby brother's cheek, like it was changing buses. Your mother slapped it mid-air and called it divine reflexes. You believed her. Bedbugs? Oh yes, those too. They nest in the cracks of the wooden bed frame and emerge in the dark, feasting like tiny vampires. You've tried everything. Rubbing garlic on the posts, hanging sprigs of rue and wormwood, even chanting psalms while flipping the mattress. Nothing works. They're eternal. You turn onto your side and stare at the wall, which is painted not with pigment, but with the slow, greasy imprint of decades of heads resting in the same spot. You recognise your own little smear. Everyone has one. A badge of survival. The itch begins. It always begins. Your ankle, your back, the side of your neck. It's probably nothing, or it's everything. You scratch, try to stop, scratch again. You remind yourself not to itch too hard. Last week you bled. The scab is still there, right behind your ear, throbbing slightly. There's a weird comfort in knowing everyone around you is suffering the same fate. Your sister groans and starts scratching her scalp with both hands. Your brother flails and mutters something about ants. Your grandmother, completely unbothered, farts softly and turns over. You envy her. The bedding itself isn't much help. The mattress is stuffed with straw, old straw damp from years of sweat and leaks, crawling with mites. You change it occasionally, but it's not like you're working with premium materials. Sometimes it's just hay. Once, it was dried moss. That year didn't go well. You still find twigs in your shift sometimes. Your blanket is wool, coarse and patched, warm enough to trap heat and definitely warm enough to trap fleas. You've tried airing it out. Once you even beat it with a stick for an hour, screaming your frustrations into the skier, the bugs applauded, and then crawled back in. You're not entirely helpless, though. You've got tricks. A sachet of dried pennyroyal tucked into the mattress might help ward off a few. A bit of vinegar rubbed on your ankles before bed. You've even tried lighting a smudge stick made of rosemary and thyme. It worked, kind of. Your bed smelled like a roast chicken for 3 nights. There are more extreme measures. Boiling your clothes, if you can spare the fuel. Hanging your bedding in the sun for days. You had heard of a woman who buried her mattress in a shallow grave, hoping the cold would kill the lice. It didn't, but it did scare the neighbours. Even the nobility don't escape this. They might have fancier beds, silk sheets, maybe even feather-stuffed mattresses, but the bugs are democratic. They don't care about your lineage. Queen or peasant, your blood tastes the same. Probably better if you're clean, honestly. They love a fresher scalp. There's some historical debate about just how bad the infestations were. Some argue that people were so accustomed to them, they barely noticed. Others suggest that the more disgusting elements and mungnids have been exaggerated by later generations looking to romanticize their own cleanliness. But when you wake up with welts on your thighs and blood on your fingertips, it doesn't feel like exaggeration. It feels like war. You pull the blanket up to your chin, scratch one last time and close your eyes. You can hear the night noises outside, wind through the thatch, the occasional owl hoot, distant dogs barking. Inside, it's all a breath and shuffle and the occasional slap as someone else takes out a bug mid-feed. Eventually you drift off. Your dreams are weird. Always are. Sometimes they're about warm baths, clean sheets, solitude. Sometimes they're about being chased by a lice the size of a goat. You prefer the baths, and in the morning you'll wake with bites, sore shoulders, a stiff neck, and the same scratchy shift clinging to your body. You'll light a new candle, heat some water, dig out the comb, and go to war all over again, because sleep in the medieval world is not about comfort. It's about endurance. The bathhouse is steaming, literally. You walk into the wooden structure, ducking your head beneath a low, soot-darkened beam, and are immediately swallowed by a wave of humid air that smells like sweat, wood smoke, rosemary, and something less pleasant. It's hot, thick, the kind of warmth that fogs your brain and your pores at the same time. You take a breath and try not to gag. There's mould in the corners, mildew in the buckets, and a puddle on the floor that's both suspicious and definitely warm. Welcome to your weekly or more likely monthly encounter with cleanliness. It's public, of course. You're here with other women from your village, all equally grimy, equally tired, and equally resigned to the strange experience of stripping down in front of each other and soaking in someone else's filth. You try not to think about it too hard. You've trained your brain to file this whole experience under better than nothing, which is a low bar but still something. You disrobe in a small changing area separated from the main bath by a flimsy curtain. It does little to shield you from the prying eyes of others or the creeping drafts from the gaps in the walls. Your clothes are piled in the corner, a damp, crusty lump of wool, linen and dried effort. You step into the bathing chamber barefoot, flinching as your heel lands in a mysterious smear that may or may not have once been soap. The main tub is enormous, round, made of thick, dark wood, and filled with lukewarm water that's been reused more times than you want to imagine. It's cloudy, floating with skin flakes, clumps of hair, and what might be the remnants of someone's foot scrub. Someone offers you a small cup to rinse yourself with. You smile politely and use it to test the temperature. Not hot, not cold, just disappointingly tepid. You climb in, trying not to scream as your body adjusts. Around you, women chatter, laugh, groan, and gossip. One is scrubbing her feet with a rough cloth and humming. Another is rubbing juniper berries into her hair, like she's trying to summon a forest spirit. You sit there, submerged to your collarbones, letting the grime soften and lift from your skin. The water doesn't move so much as wobble around you. You feel like a vegetable in a soup no one wants to eat. Bathhouses aren't just for hygiene, they're social hubs. You catch up on local drama, whose cow wandered into whose garden, whose son got caught stealing cheese, which midwife is suspected of being too good at herbal remedies. You nod, murmur appropriately, and focus on not making eye contact with the floating object that just bumped into your arm. It's small, dark. You decide it's a leaf, probably. There's a woman scrubbing her underarms with vinegar and salt. It stings, she says, but keeps the demons out. You make a mental note to try it. You once tried using a pumice stone, but it left your skin raw for a week. Another woman dips her head backward into the water to rinse her hair. You silently count the seconds and then calculate how many other heads have done the same in that same exact spot. Fun fact, medieval bathhouses weren't always so grim. In earlier centuries, especially in places influenced by Roman or Islamic traditions, bathing was a luxurious, regular, even sensual experience. But in your corner of the world, times are tougher. The church has grown increasingly wary of communal bathing. Too much skin, too much temptation, too many people slipping into sin. You heard a priest once claim that women who bathed together often found themselves possessed by impure thoughts. He said it with such certainty you almost believed him, until you remembered that this bathwater could kill any impure thought on contact. Still, there's a ritual to it. You scrub, rinse, sigh. You scrape the dirt from under your fingernails, pick straw from your hair, and rub soap, if available, onto your elbows and knees. The soap is homemade, of course. Lye and animal fat, boiled until it hardens into pale, greasy chunks that burn if they get in your eyes. You once used too much and ended up smelling like roast pork for 2 days. It was a weird 2 days. The debate among historians about bathhouse etiquette is ongoing. Some say women and men bathe together regularly, especially in smaller communities. Others insist that gender separation was strictly enforced. In your village, it depends on who's running the bathhouse that day. If it's old Greta, the sexes are divided. If it's her niece, well, things get more interesting. Today it's women only, which you're thankful for, because you really didn't want to see the blacksmith again. Hey, not after last time. You reach for a rag and begin gently wiping the back of your neck. The water has gone noticeably cooler now. Someone has added herbs, lavender, maybe a bit of chamomile. It's a faint scent, but enough to trick your brain into thinking this is cleansing. Someone else has poured in vinegar to disinfect the tub. You try not to think about what exactly it's disinfecting. You share a few jokes, someone mimics the priest again. Another tells a scandalous story about the miller's wife and the cooper's apprentice. There's laughter, even as you all float together in the same mildly disgusting soup. It's strange, comforting. You're all filthy, all exhausted, all doing your best with what little you have. The bath doesn't make you clean exactly, but it gives you the illusion of renewal, so that's almost better. Eventually it's time to get out. Your skin is pruny, your legs itch. You rise, careful not to slip, and someone hands you a rough cloth to dry off with. It feels like sandpaper. You blot rather than rub. You dress again, into the same clothes of course. They're no cleaner than when you took them off, but you feel marginally less like a swamp creature. And that's a win. You step outside into the cool air. It hits your damp skin like a blessing. You close your eyes and inhale, free from the bathhouse smell for the first time in over an hour. Your hair is wet. Your dress is clinging. You're probably going to catch a chill, but you also feel strangely alive, and in that brief, flickering moment under the grey medieval sky, you almost feel clean. Dinner is a bowl of greyish-brown stew, and you're eating it with your fingers. That's not unusual. In fact, it's expected. There are spoons somewhere, probably made of wood and coated in layers of old grease and regret, but they're reserved for soup or guests, and you are neither. So tonight, like most nights, you eat with your bare hands. Hands that, despite rinses and the occasional half-hearted scrub, haven't been properly cleaned in days, maybe weeks. You try not to think about it. The stew is hot, salty and vaguely meaty, though the meat is mostly gristle and mystery parts. It's better not to ask what animal it came from. You sit on a low stool near the hearth, hunched over your bowl like a medieval gargoyle, scooping stew-soaked barley into your mouth with stiff fingers. Your fingernails are full of dirt from the garden. There's a cut on your thumb from chopping wood earlier, and it stings when you dip it into the broth. That's fine. Salt is good for wounds, right? Probably. Your hands are your tools, your utensils, and your napkin all in one. You wipe them on your dress between bites, a dress that already carries the stains of half a dozen meals and a few questionable encounters with chamber pot spills. There's no fork. That's not even a thing yet. Unless you're absurdly rich and/or Italian. In your world, fingers are the most reliable option, even if they taste faintly like turnips and sheep lard. Clean hands? Who dis? The idea of washing before meals exists in theory. Some noble houses have bowls and pitchers set out for rinsing hands before and after eating, often accompanied by a servant with a towel. In your household, you get a splash of cold water from a bucket if you're lucky, and you might dry your hands on the inside of your cloak if the cat isn't already lying on it. But here's the thing, no one expects you to be clean, not by modern standards. The bar is so low it's practically buried. If your hands aren't visibly bleeding or covered in dung, you're considered ready to eat. You once saw a man cut a hunk of bread with a knife he'd just used to skin a rabbit, then lick the blade clean. He's still alive, somehow. Probably immune to everything now. Your cousin eats with both hands, tearing chunks of bread and dunking them into the shared stew pot in the centre of the table. Everyone's hands go in there eventually. No one speaks about it. It's communal eating at its finest, or worst. You once got scolded for reaching with your left hand, superstitiously considered unclean in some households, though honestly both of your hands are equally disgusting. It's not that hygiene is ignored entirely, it just follows a different logic. Washing your hands might be done before church, or after touching a corpse, or during certain feast days when ritual cleanliness matters. But in the daily grind of life, there's just not enough time, water or soap to scrub up every time you touch a goat, stir a pot or bury some questionable meat in the back gardens to age. You finish your meal and lick your fingers, and because letting anything go to waste feels criminal. A thin strand of something stringy gets caught between your molars, and you pick it out with your fingernail. There. Better. Sort of. You rub your hands together, watching the residue flake off onto your lap, then give them a token wipe with a bit of cloth that might have once been white. The same cloth gets used to mop spills, polish pots, and occasionally blow noses. You don't ask questions about it. You just keep using it. There's a fringe remedy someone in the village swears by, dipping hands in ale to cleanse the humours. You tried it once. Your hands were sticky for 2 days. Another woman uses vinegar and lavender oil, though you suspect it's more for the smell than sanitation. If it works, it's probably by accident. Modern historians argue about how seriously people took hand washing. Some records show hand basins were a common sight in wealthier homes and monasteries. Others suggest that for common folk, hand washing was more performative than practical. A quick splash, symbolic rinse. Not so much scrubbing between the fingers as make it look like you tried. You sometimes wonder what your hands would look like if they weren't constantly nicked, cracked, or stained. Would your nails be pink instead of greyish-brown? Would your palms stop feeling like sandpaper? Would your fingerprints finally grow back? Unlikely. This is the medieval hand, tough, useful, layered in stories. A historian could study your life just by tracing the scars across your knuckles. That one's from the time you caught a chicken with your bare hands. That long scratch, a cat, that deep groove near your thumb, bread knife. There's one from a splintered spinning wheel, another from digging out a stubborn root. Your hands are a catalogue of survival. After dinner, you toss your bowl aside, clay chipped but still intact, and reach for a crust of bread to wipe your fingers. Then you toss that into the fire. Waste not, want not, and honestly, your hands are just going to get filthy again tomorrow. You don't even try to fight it anymore. You glance over at your mother, who's kneading dough for the next morning's bread. Her hands are deep in the flour, flecked with old dough, her fingernails invisible under years of wear. She sees you staring and smirks. "They'll never be clean," she says. "Get used to it." You already have, and so, with your stomach full, your fingers only moderately crusty, and your sense of dignity thoroughly adjusted to medieval expectations, you lean back and burp softly. No one notices or cares. Because in a world without forks, without soap, without shame, clean hands are a luxury. Filthy ones are just reality. Your face is pale tonight, not from fear or fever, but because you've smeared it with a thin coat of white lead and vinegar. That's makeup for you, toxic, crumbly, and wholly unavoidable if you want to look like someone who hasn't been in the sun or touched by death. Which is ironic, really. since the stuff you just rubbed all over your cheeks is probably slowly poisoning you. But hey, beauty is sacrifice, and in the medieval world that sacrifice might just be your internal organs. You sit by the fire peering into a dull shard of polished metal, dabbing your fingertips into a little clay pot of lead paste. It smells vaguely metallic, sour, and a little like old milk. You grimace, dab, smooth it out. The goal is clear, the paler the better. Pale means rich, pale means holy. Pale means you haven't been labouring in fields, birthing livestock, or, God forbid, doing anything useful. If you look like a ghost, congratulations, you're winning. The effect is not exactly flattering. Your skin takes on a chalky, sickly hue. Your pores vanish under the thick layer, and any hint of natural colour is smothered out. Your nose looks like it's about to flake off, and the fine lines around your eyes deepen under the weight of the powder. But you look wealthier, and in some circles, that's more attractive than being alive. You use a little berry juice on your lips, just enough to suggest you haven't died yet, and a smear of soot rubbed along your lash line. No eyeliner pencils here, just ash and a hope that you don't rub your eyes later and blind yourself. Some women use crushed antimony for this, but the last one who tried ended up with swollen lids and a face like a boiled potato. You're sticking with soot, thanks. Your cheeks are already red from the cold, but you blot them with a cloth anyway to reduce the flush. Rouge is used sparingly. Too much and you look like a sinner. Too little and you look like a corpse. There's a sweet spot in between that you aim for with your thumb stained from madder root, or maybe just from picking too many beets. No one's asking for perfection here. Just a vague sense that you might be worth marrying. The standards are ridiculous, of course. You're expected to look fragile, delicate, untouched by manual labour, but still hearty enough to bear 12 children without dying. Your skin must be pale, your eyes wide, your lips full but not lewd, your teeth intact but not too perfect, because that would be suspicious. Basically, you need to look like a saint painted by someone who's never actually seen a woman before. There's a woman in town, Agnes, who takes things to another level. She applies the lead paste twice a day, even in summer. Her skin is flawless, like marble. Also, she faints a lot, and her hair started falling out last year. No one mentions it, but you've seen her collecting herbs behind the church, trying to brew something to slow it down. You offered her rosemary oil once. She hissed at you, literally hissed. You're not sure if it was the lead talking or just Agnes. Makeup isn't about glamour, it's about status. Nobility wears it as the sign of refinement. Lower classes imitate it poorly, often with homemade concoctions that double as skin irritants. You once tried to make a face powder from crushed eggshells and chalk. It clumped, it cracked. You looked like a sad clown who had just crawled out of a well. There's a strange ritual to it though, sitting down, opening your little pots and cloth-wrapped bundles, mixing, dabbing, smearing, blending with fingers already dark under the nails. You whisper a small prayer that the lead doesn't seep too deep, but honestly, what's a little blood poisoning in the grand scheme of survival? Some women swear by natural beauty. God made your face, they say. Why mess with it? But God also made lice, and you mess with those, don't you? Besides, there's a big difference between being natural and being mistaken for a peasant. You don't want to tempt fate like that. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how widespread makeup use was among medieval women. Some evidence points to a fairly robust beauty culture, especially in urban areas where access to herbs, pigments, and trade goods made experimentation possible. Other sources claim most women didn't bother, preferring cleanliness, such as it was, to cosmetics. But that assumes they had time for either. You'd argue you don't have time for anything, and yet here you are, scrubbing ash onto your eyelids like a woman possessed. Of course, your makeup doesn't last long. You step outside and the wind immediately begins undoing your work. Your lips crack, your nose starts to run, the lead paste dries and flakes under your veil. You catch your reflection later in a rain puddle, and barely recognise yourself, a pale blur with coal-smudged eyes and a look of resigned survival. Some girls use perfume to cover the smell of the makeup itself. Yours is mixed with rosewater and a hint of goat tallow. It kind of works. If someone stands really far away and holds their breath, but no one's too close anyway, not unless they have intentions, and if they do, you're probably better off with more lead and fewer smiles. There are weirder beauty trends too. Some women pluck their hairlines to make their foreheads appear higher. It's considered sophisticated. You tried it once, tugging out tiny hairs with a fishbone pin. It hurt. You gave up halfway through and spent the next month with a patchy, lopsided forehead. Never again. Then there's the obsession with light eyebrows. You heard of someone bleaching theirs with pigeon droppings mixed with vinegar. It worked. Her skin peeled, but her brows disappeared. That was the goal. No one asked about her rash. We all agreed not to bring it up. Tonight, as you sit by the hearth scraping the last bit of white paste from your pot, you wonder how much longer you'll keep doing this. Smearing poison on your face for approval, pretending not to notice the way your skin stings after every application. But the answer's always the same, until something better comes along. Or until you're married, or dead, whichever arrives first. You smooth the paste over your chin one last time, trying to hide a blemish that's been there for 3 weeks. It's probably infected. Everything is these days. But with the right lighting, a half smile and the right amount of self-delusion, you can almost look elegant. And so you sit, glowing faintly in the firelight, face covered in white death, and tell yourself, this is what beauty looks like. You walk past a barrel of urine this morning like it's the most normal thing in the world. Because it is. It sits right outside the tanner's shop, half covered with a stained cloth, steaming slightly in the autumn sun. Little sign carved into a plank above it reads, "Donations welcome." And yes, that means exactly what you think it means. In the medieval world, urine is not waste. It's a resource, a multi-tool, nature's own yellow miracle. And today you'll be using it to wash clothes, treat a blister, and maybe, if you're feeling particularly ambitious, try lightening your hair. You're not thrilled about any of this, by the way. Collecting pee is an actual chore. Your family keeps a dedicated chamber pot just for it, stored neatly by the hearth. Every morning, someone, usually you, lucky you, empties it into the communal barrel. You've learned to do it quickly with minimal splash, and you always hold your breath. Fresh urine isn't terrible, but aged urine, that stuff has a soul. It's sharp, eye-watering, and thick in a way that air should never be. But this ammonia-rich horror juice, often called chamber lye, is the backbone of your daily hygiene. Not in the way you might wish, there's no clean-scented soap or bubbly bathwater, but in the terrifying, effective alchemical sense. Ammonia cuts grease, it bleaches, it sterilizes. So of course, someone somewhere long ago looked at a puddle of pee and thought, yes, laundry. You gather a few linen shifts and carry them to the washing site, a wooden trough tucked behind your cottage, shaded by a tree that's probably judging you. You mix urine with the water, because you are not a monster, and start scrubbing. The smell is immediate. Your eyes sting. You gag a little, but you keep going, dunking and pounding the fabric with a wooden paddle until the stains fade and the cloth lightens just a shade or two. Is it clean? By medieval standards, absolutely. By any other standards, let's move on. Some of your neighbours claim they can tell who's using fresh lye and who's skimping with stale water. There's an unspoken competition to have the whitest shifts on wash day, and yes, this contest is based on who has the most access to quality urine. A woman down the lane, Magda, actually collects from her neighbours in exchange for bread. She's built an empire on other people's bladders. You can't decide if that's disgusting or brilliant. Once the clothes are done, you move on to your feet. There's a cracked spot on your heel that won't heal, and the midwife recommends soaking it in warm urine. Sterilizes the wound, she said. Cleans out the bad blood. So you grit your teeth and sit on a stool, one foot plunged into a steaming bucket of diluted pee, trying to think about literally anything else. Your dog looks at you like you've betrayed something sacred. Now, about the hair thing. You heard a rumour, probably from a drunk cousin, that mixing stale urine with ashes makes a powerful bleaching agent. It's used by washerwomen, and occasionally the daring. You decide to try it. You mix the two into a paste, slather it onto your damp hair, and sit in the sun. 10 minutes in, your scalp starts to tingle. 15 minutes in, it starts to burn. By the time you wash it out, your hair smells like regret and scorched wood. But it is slightly lighter, also crunchier. You tell yourself that's fine. The use of urine in daily life isn't limited to the poor. Even noble households have jars of the stuff for laundry, cleaning, and medicinal purposes. A few even dab it behind their ears as a perfume base masked with rosewater or cloves. It's rare, expensive, and horrific, but fashionable. You once caught a whiff of a lady who smelled like spring flowers trying to cover up a battlefield. It was complex. And then there's the dentistry. You're not ready for this, but let's go there. Some beauty guides recommend rinsing your mouth with urine to whiten your teeth. You have not tried this yet, but you know someone who has. Her breath could fell a goat, but her teeth are oddly pale. You avoid direct conversation with her whenever possible. The irony in all this? It works, sort of. Urine's ammonia content really does lift stains and kill bacteria. Even modern scientists looking back admit that medieval people may have accidentally stumbled into something halfway effective. Disgusting, but effective. Just don't think too hard about the mechanics. There are also weird little superstitions tied to urine. Some say the first pee of the morning is best for healing. Others use it in fortune-telling, examining its colour or bubbling pattern to predict illness or pregnancy. You once saw a healer swirl a woman's urine in a bowl and declare that her womb was warm with twins. She was wrong. The woman had gas. Scholars debate whether this widespread use was born out of necessity, or if it became cultural habit over time. In places with limited access to clean water or expensive soaps, urine filled a void, pun absolutely intended. Others argue that its use was more about ritual cleanliness than actual sanitation. But really, you suspect it's both. When you have nothing, you use everything, even pee. So now, at the end of your very long, very aromatic day, you sit by the fire with your freshly laundered and faintly tangy-smelling shift hanging nearby. Your hair feels like hay, your foot still burns slightly, but you've done the work, you've cleaned, you've soaked. You've bleached, and yes, you've marinated in your own waste products. You stir the pot on the hearth with the same hand you used to mix the laundry lye, and you try not to think about the chain of events that led you to this point. At least you didn't get any in your eye today. That happened last month. You couldn't smell anything but vinegar for 3 days. You hear a knock at the door, someone dropping off their contribution to the neighbourhood barrel. You nod politely, pee waits for no one. And as you rinse your hands in the same bucket used to clean the dog, you murmur to yourself, nature provides. And then you add, but she's also kinda gross. Your armpits are quietly plotting against you. Not loudly, this isn't a full-body betrayal, but with the slow, creeping persistence of something that's been ignored too long. By midday, you're aware of them constantly. A damp warmth spreading outward, soaking through your shift, your overdress, and whatever illusion of dignity you thought you were carrying around. The smell isn't exactly bad to your nose anymore. More like seasoned, aged. A fine vintage of body odour aged in woolen barrels with delicate hints of onions, fear and goat. The medieval world doesn't offer deodorant, of course, that would be too easy. No sticks, sprays or creams. No charming scents like spring breeze or lavender nightfall. If anything, the names for your natural aroma would be more like peat bog panic or faint regret on market day. And yet you do have options, sort of. You start the morning with your usual ritual, a damp cloth to the underarms, maybe a quick splash of vinegar if you're feeling fancy. It stings if you've shaved recently, which you haven't. Shaving isn't really common, nor is it expected. Hair is just another layer of protection, or depending on the season, insulation. But when you do try to remove it, it's with a dull blade, a shaky hand, and a whispered prayer. Last time you nicked yourself so deeply the midwife had to sew you up with thread meant for saddle repairs. So today, the hair stays. After the splash and pat routine, you reach for your secret weapon, herbs. You keep a little pouch of dried rosemary, thyme, and mint tied to your belt. Not for snacking, though, honestly, sometimes you're tempted, but for rubbing into the pits of your dress. You grind the leaves between your fingers, inhale the sharp green scent, and then press it firmly into the underarm area of your shift, hoping the smell of medieval salad will overpower the stink of human struggle. It doesn't, but it helps. Some days you experiment. A friend swore by alum stone, sharpened crystal rubbed directly into the skin. You tried it. It worked for half a day until the crystal cracked and cut you, and then you smelled like blood and sweat, which was somehow worse. Another woman recommended lemon peel. Where she got a lemon, you'll never know. You tried rubbing turnip instead. It didn't go well. There's a strange comfort in knowing that everyone else smells just as ripe as you. It's a communal experience, a shared haze. You're used to it. Most people are. If someone doesn't smell at least mildly musky by noon, you get suspicious. They're either a witch or a noblewoman with too much access to rose oil and moral flexibility. You keep your distance. Bathing helps. But it's infrequent and not always effective. You can scrub yourself raw in a tub full of herbs and still emerge smelling like someone who's been baking bread in their armpits. That's because the clothes are the real problem. Your wool dress has absorbed so much sweat over the past few months that it might be developing sentience. There's a patch under your right arm that's permanently darker than the rest of the fabric, and no amount of vinegar, sunshine, or quiet begging will lift it. There are regional quirks in how women deal with the funk. In some places, it's fashionable to carry perfumed pomanders, small orbs filled with cloves, cinnamon and crushed flowers, hanging from belts or tucked into bodices. You tried making one. It turned mouldy in a week and exploded in your apron. Still, it made you smell like cloves for a solid 3 days, so maybe worth it. In wealthier households, women might rub scented oils into their underarms, olive oil infused with rose, or almond oil mixed with orange peel. You've only smelled these things once when a merchant's wife passed by you at the market and left behind a trail of what could only be described as divine distraction. You followed her for 4 whole stalls before catching yourself. That's how desperate things have gotten. You're chasing strangers for the scent of citrus. There's also the matter of superstition. Some believe armpit sweat carries your soul's health. A strong smell means you're strong-willed. A faint smell means weakness. You once heard a priest claim that the Virgin Mary's sweat smelled like lilies. No one believed him, but we all nodded just in case. Some women go the opposite route entirely. They embrace the funk, wear it like armour. One midwife you know, Mathilde, says she never masks her scent. She says it makes her more trustworthy, more of the people. It also clears the room faster than a scream. You respect her immensely. And yes, let's talk about the men. Because while you're here stuffing mint leaves into your cleavage to mask the collateral damage of pit sweat, they're out in the field reeking like livestock and ale and nobody says a word. The double standard is exhausting. If you smell bad, you're unclean. If he smells bad, he's a man. You fantasized about switching clothes just to test the theory. You're pretty sure no one would notice, except for the fact that he'd immediately trip over your skirt and swear at the sheep. Historians still debate how much emphasis was placed on odor in medieval society. Some argue that people were so used to bad smells that they didn't register them. Others suggest that the wealthier classes were acutely aware of scent and used it to reinforce status. The truth is probably both. For you, scent is survival. You monitor your own smell the way others monitor the weather, frequently and with a mixture of dread and resignation. By the end of the day, your underarms are once again damp, the herbal rub long faded. You strip off your dress and wave it out the window in a weak attempt at airing it out. The breeze doesn't help. You consider stuffing more mint into your shift for the next day, maybe adding lavender this time, if you can spare it. You lie down, arms at your sides, praying the cat doesn't pick tonight to sleep under your armpit again. It's not fair to her, or to you. You whisper to yourself that tomorrow you'll try something new, maybe vinegar and nettle. Maybe you'll just shave again and accept the sting, but for now, you close your eyes surrounded by the scent of survival. Because in the medieval world, deodorant is whatever you can get your hands on, and usually it's rosemary. It starts with a tiny itch at your scalp. Nothing dramatic, just the faintest tickle behind your left ear. You scratch it absently, thinking it's a stray hair, maybe a bit of straw from the bedding. But then it happens again and again. A slow Habib, creeping army of pinpricks across your crown. You close your eyes, take a deep breath, and accept the truth you already know. The lice are back. Not that they ever really left. You sit down by the hearth and grab your bone comb from its spot on the wall, worn smooth from years of use and desperate scratching. This isn't a one-time thing. It's part of the daily ritual. Comb the hair, catch the lice, roast them alive. Repeat. You part your hair with your fingers and begin dragging the comb through the strands, watching closely for the telltale specks, brownish, scuttling, smug. You catch 3 on the first pass. They try to run. You flick them into the fire with grim satisfaction. Pop, 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 till one escapes into your lap. You'll find it later. Probably after it's laid eggs. You've tried everything. Vinegar rinses, garlic poultices, raw onion rubbed directly into the scalp. Once, a woman told you to wear a cloth soaked in boiled nettles on your head for an hour. You smelled like a compost heap for a week, and the lice threw a party. They live not just in your hair, but in your clothes, your bedding, your bonnet, your very sense of peace. They're everywhere. Tiny, determined squatters who pay no rent and leave behind itchy little bite trails as a thank you. You dream of them sometimes, not as insects, but as people, tenants arguing over property lines across your scalp. One's installing a fireplace, another's hosting a wedding. The veil you wear during the day, meant for modesty and piety, doubles as a sauna for lice, warm, dark, enclosed. It's perfect. You once left your veil out in the sun and watched a dozen lice scurry out as if you'd torched their village. That night you slept with your head uncovered and woke up freezing and furious. They'd migrated to your eyebrows. You try to stay clean, but as we've established, cleanliness is a medieval illusion. You might rinse your hair once a month, maybe soak it in rosemary water if it's a holy day and someone died recently. But more often than not, your scalp is a crusty, oily battleground. And the lice? They love it. They thrive in it. You might as well be raising them on purpose. There's a girl in your village no older than 10 who had her head shaved clean last summer. Everyone said it was because of heat or fleas or just a bad cut gone worse. But you know the truth. Lice. Her mother couldn't take it anymore. You remember watching the girl cry as the shears clicked through her hair, thick clumps falling like wilted flowers. You haven't cut your own hair since, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, with your scalp on fire, you think about it. Your comb hits a snag, a nest, a real one. You part your hair and see them. Eggs lined up like tiny opals glued to a strand of hair. You can't get them out with the comb, so you start picking them with your fingers. One by one, crushing them between your nails. The smell is faint, sour. You whisper curses under your breath with every pop. It's strangely satisfying. A small war you can win, but it's not just you. Everyone has lice, you know this. You've seen the village girls huddled together in the fields, combing each other's hair like chimpanzees. It's normal, expected, even a bit social. You once had a full conversation about taxes and goat prices while flicking nits out of your cousin's braid. The rhythm of it is almost calming. Some people in wealthier households try to prevent lice by rubbing their scalps with oils, olive, almond, even goose fat infused with herbs. You tried that once. It worked for a day. Then the lice adapted. They always do. You've begun to suspect they're smarter than they look, and the lice aren't even the worst of it. There are fleas, bedbugs, mites. You've heard of body lice so tenacious they survive boiling. One woman in town swears that her last infestation was so bad she burned all her clothes. She's been wearing the same tunic ever since. You think she might have just wanted an excuse to start over. Historians debate whether lice were truly that common in the medieval period, but you know better. You live it. Every day is a new round of irritation and surrender. And sure, lice exist today, but they're treated, handled, removed. You have no shampoo, no comb fine enough, no clinic. You have fingers, fire, and rage, and that's about it. There's a fringe theory that lice only infest unclean people. You laugh at that, as if you have the luxury of being clean, as if lice check hygiene reports before moving in. No, they come for everyone, rich or poor. The noblewoman's powdered wig is just as infested as your linen cap. You've seen it. You once brushed against a merchant's daughter and saw something wriggle into her neckline. She smiled at you like she smelled of lavender and secrets. But you knew. Oh, you knew. Tonight, you'll braid your hair tightly and sleep with a scarf tied around your head, hoping to suffocate the stragglers. It won't work. You'll wake up scratching, angry, itchy, half dreaming of a world where your scalp belongs to you, and not a colony of freeloaders. But for now, you pull the comb through one more time, watch another louse tumble into your lap and whisper, "I will end you." And you mean it. You're sitting on a 3-legged stool in the corner of the cottage, skirt hoisted awkwardly around your knees, staring at a clove of garlic that's about to go, well, where garlic was never meant to go. This is your life now. Welcome to the medieval approach to gynecological health, where the phrase modern medicine doesn't exist, and your options for treating, say, a vaginal yeast infection range from light a candle and hope to insert this roasted mouse and say a prayer. You, ever the pragmatist, have decided to start with the garlic, raw, slightly peeled, blessed by the midwife for purity. The itch has been relentless. Not just discomfort, it's the kind of raw, sandpapered agony that makes you question the purpose of your existence. You've tried igoring it, tried washing with cool water and wild thyme, even skipped bread for a week, suspecting that maybe, just maybe, the excess of barley in your diet is causing something to bloom where it shouldn't. No luck. Whatever's going on in your underworld is not surrendering to common sense. Hence the garlic. You tie it in a small scrap of linen. No one's reckless enough to go full clove without some form of containment, and gently, slowly introduce it to the problem area. It's cold, then warm, then cold again. You sit still, feeling like a haunted bread oven, and try not to panic. You tell yourself this is healing, that women have done this for centuries, that the midwife probably knows what she's talking about. You're not sure she does. She's the one who once suggested inserting a live frog to balance the internal waters. You declined, though she claimed it had worked on her sister-in-law. That woman now walks with a limp and won't discuss the matter. Vaginal health in your world is a gamble. You're expected to endure your body quietly and gracefully no matter how much it betrays you. Cramps, God's punishment, discharge, bad humours, yeast infection, demon in the womb. Solutions are passed down woman to woman, often in whispers over baskets of laundry or behind the church when the priest isn't looking. Some methods are harmless. Chamomile steam baths, sitz baths with lavender, poultices made of mashed calendula. Others are horrifying. Pounded leeches applied to the vulva to draw out poison. Hot stones placed near the entrance to chase away air spirits. One woman tried using wine vinegar. She couldn't sit for 3 days. You once overheard a conversation about using honey. Pure, golden, healing honey. Sounds soothing, right? Except the beeswax chunks weren't removed properly. That poor girl swelled up like a melon and had to be doused in snow for relief. You sent her bread for a week. She still twitches when she sees a hive. Then there's the religious angle. If something's wrong with your lady parts, clearly it's a moral failing. You've been impure, thought impure thoughts. Looked too long at the cooper's apprentice with the nice calves. Now your womb is punishing you. Best confess, or fast, or sleep on a cold floor for 7 nights while reciting Psalm 51. Spoiler, none of that helps. Some women claim to have found relief from enchanted amulets. Tiny charms tied around the waist, filled with dried herbs, prayers, or even bits of metal. You made one once, it chafed. Then you forgot about it and it fell into the fire. You took that as a sign from God, or at least your uterus. And let's talk about childbirth for a moment, because if you think infections are bad, try pushing out a baby without the benefit of modern medicine, anesthesia, or anything more advanced than screaming and the occasional boiled blade. Postpartum care? Here's a cloth. Bleed into that. You'll be fine. Probably. You've seen women hobble for months after giving birth, still raw, still torn, still pretending nothing is wrong because complaining makes it worse. One woman kept fainting every time she stood up. The village said she was cursed. You were the only one who noticed she hadn't passed her afterbirth completely. The midwife pulled out what was left with her bare hands. It smelled like the end of days. Infections down there are common and quietly deadly. Abscesses, sores, strange growths. No one talks about them unless they can't walk. And even then, the cure is usually poultices, wine and hope. You've heard rumours that noble women sometimes receive better care. Foreign tinctures, professional midwives, even tools, but those are rumours. And in your world, rumours are worth less than a clean rag. Fringe fact, some women have turned to astrology for answers. They plan their healing rituals based on the moon's phase, the alignment of Venus, or the day of the week. Tuesday is bad for bleeding, apparently. You once timed your vinegar sitz bath to coincide with a lunar eclipse. Nothing changed, except that your cat wouldn't come near you for days. Scholars today argue over whether these folk remedies were pure superstition or a primitive form of science. Honestly, you don't care. You'll try anything once if it promises even 5 minutes of relief, including the current garlic experiment, which is now giving you a strange tingling sensation and the creeping suspicion that you may never look at stew the same way again. You shift on the stool and grimace. The linen pouch is still in place. You wonder if it's working. You wonder if it's fermenting. You wonder if you're going to smell like a butcher's pantry for the next week. You wonder if it's worth it. Then you scratch and realise it might be, even just to reduce the itch by 1 degree, so you wait. You sit there in the dim light of the fire feeling ridiculous, determined and oddly hopeful. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders, breathe through your mouth, and remind yourself you're doing your best. Because in the medieval world, vaginal health is not a priority. It's a private battle. A quiet war waged with herbs, folklore, and the occasional bulb of garlic. And tonight that war smells very, very strong. You glance down at your hands and sigh. There it is again, that familiar crust of grime under your fingernails, darker than soil and more mysterious than you'd like to admit. You could probably date your last 5 meals by what's hiding under those nails. Some bread dough, definitely. A hint of beet, and something grey-green from yesterday's unfortunate attempt at boiling cabbage. You've tried scrubbing them clean with a scrap of linen dipped in water, but short of chiselling it out with a sharp stick, that dirt is staying put. Medieval manicure? This is it. Your nails are not elegant. They're short, uneven, and riddled with tiny cracks. One is torn halfway down and keeps catching on your sleeve. Another has something suspicious stuck beneath it. Possibly a grain of barley, possibly an insect leg. You scrape it out with your thumbnail and flick it into the fire. It hisses slightly as if confirming your worst fears. There's no such thing as nail clippers. You trim your nails with a knife, or your teeth if no one's looking. Sometimes you just let them break naturally. A clean edge is rare. Your cuticles? Torn. Your knuckles? Cracked. The backs of your hands are smudged with ash and scarred from bites, burns, and the time you tried to wrangle a goose that was having none of your nonsense. Your hands are a diary, a visual record of every chore, mistake and minor disaster you've endured. That red line down your palm, you cut yourself while gutting a fish, the scab near your wrist, a splatter of hot fat while cooking, the dark bruise at the base of your thumb. You pinched it in the grain mill 3 days ago and it's still angry. You've started referring to your hands as the Chronicles of Pain Volume 1. There's no soap unless you're washing laundry or lucky enough to barter for a tiny sliver from a travelling merchant. Even then it's rough, lye-based, and smells like burned fat and wet wool. You've used it on your hands exactly once. Took off a layer of skin. You cried. Your mother told you to stop being dramatic and handed you a rag soaked in vinegar. Still you make the occasional effort. Once a week you sit by the hearth with a pot of warm water, possibly shared with someone else's feet, and soak your fingers for a bit. It loosens the grime, softens the calluses. Sometimes you rub your palms with salt and thyme, not for cleaning, but just to feel like a person again. If there's a cleanish cloth nearby, you dry them off gently and admire your work. They still look like you've been mining coal, but a little less so. There's a popular belief that fingernails can tell your fortune. One of the old women in the village reads them like tea leaves. She grabs your hand, runs her thumb across your nail beds, and mutters things like, "You'll fall ill before the next full moon," or "Your love line is cloudy." You don't take her seriously until the time she told you that your third fingernail was too pale and you'd catch a fever. You did. 4 days later, you've avoided her ever since. Another woman insists that if your nails are too white, it means you're cursed. Too red, possessed. You nod politely when she offers advice but refuse to let her touch you. You're not in the mood to be diagnosed with demonic influence again this week. Still, it's fascinating the way medieval people see the body, your hands especially, as more than just tools. They're symbols, expressions of your soul, your labour, your health. A noblewoman's hands are supposed to be soft, uncallous, delicate. Yours, covered in calluses so thick you could probably pick up a hot coal without flinching. You've tried. It still hurt, but less than it should have. You notice other women's hands all the time. It's instinct. You can tell who's been tanning hides, who's been spinning wool, who's been tending animals. The weaver has fine threads stuck under her nails. The midwife's hands are permanently stained from birthing fluids. The baker has flour caked so deeply into her knuckles it's basically part of her skin now. But no one judges. Not really. Because everyone's hands are a mess. Clean nails are not a sign of refinement. They're a sign you're not pulling your weight. You remember once being told to stop picking at your hands before visiting the church. "God doesn't care if you're dirty," your aunt said, "but the priest might." You cleaned them anyway, just enough to pass inspection. You've heard rumours that some noblewomen paint their nails with crushed berries or gold powder to make them shine. You tried that with beet juice once. It looked amazing for about half an hour, then dried into a sticky crust that stained your fingertips for 3 days and made it look like you'd committed a minor crime. There's also a story about a queen who kept her hands submerged in milk to soften them. You tried that with goat milk. The result? Smelled terrible. And your cat wouldn't stop licking your fingers afterward. Lesson learned, but even with the grime, the broken skin, the occasional bleeding cut, your hands work. They carry water. They need dough. They hold the comb when you're picking lice and grip the herbs when you're trying to ward off spirits. They soothe your siblings, fight your neighbours, and occasionally slap a chicken back into line. They're filthy, yes, but they're yours. Tough, stubborn, and capable. Modern historians sometimes marvel at the resilience of medieval women. You think it's all in the hands. You don't survive plagues, childbirth, and spoiled meat without developing a decent grip. Your hands don't just show your work, they are your work. Tonight you sit by the fire again, combing ash from your hair, with fingers still flecked with garlic paste and goat droppings. You glance at your nails and consider cleaning them. Then you remember what's coming tomorrow. More stew, more sheep, more reasons not to bother. So instead, you smile, pick up your wooden spoon, and stir the pot with the same hand you used to scrub the latrine earlier. It's all one big circle anyway. Because in your world, hands aren't supposed to be clean. They're supposed to be useful. It's happening. The labour pains have started. You knew this day was coming, of course. You just hoped it would arrive with a little more grace, maybe a little more warning. Instead, your belly seized up while you were elbow deep in kneading dough, and now you're hunched over a wooden table, clutching the edge, panting and trying not to scream while everyone around you scrambles like startled chickens. Your mother is shouting for the midwife. Your sister is boiling water, which won't help anyone but gives her something to do. Your cousin is just crying in the corner. You, meanwhile, are trying to keep from splitting in half. This is childbirth, medieval style, raw, messy, and fully supervised by a circle of women who've all been through it and are here to make sure you don't die, or at least not right away. They carry you to the bed, which is little more than a wooden frame stuffed with straw and regret. The sheets are old, the mattress sagging, and you can already smell your own sweat soaking through the linen. You want to curl up and disappear, but your body has other plans. The contractions are coming faster now, sharp and deep, radiating down your spine like someone's trying to saw you in half from the inside. There's no doctor, no sterile room, no epidural, just the midwife, a heavy-set woman with strong hands and the emotional range of a brick wall. She's seen everything, from breech births to stillbirths to babies that came out so fast they were landed on the floor. She nods once, sets a cloth between your leg, and tells you to breathe, like that's helpful. You try, you really do. But breathing through medieval childbirth feels like trying to stay calm while being disemboweled by a goat. Your thighs are shaking, your back is on fear, and you're pretty sure you just peed yourself, not that anyone notices or cares. The room smells like boiled herbs, burning tallow and fear. There's a candle burning near your feet, a charm tied to the bedpost, and a bowl of holy water someone sprinkled on the floor to confuse the demons. Because yes, this isn't just a medical emergency, it's a spiritual one. The church teaches that childbirth is Eve's punishment. You're suffering because you're a woman. Pain is holy. Bleeding is penance. Yang in childbirth is the closest you'll ever get to sainthood. You don't feel saintly. You feel like you're being ripped in half. The midwife mutters something about the baby being slow. She massages your belly, checks your cervix with fingers that have seen more trauma than a battlefield, and instructs you to push. You do. You push until your ears ring, until your vision goes dark, until you feel something wet and hot explode between your legs and everyone in the room gasps in unison. It's not the baby, just the water breaking. Someone pats your forehead with a damp cloth. Another woman feeds you weak beer from a wooden cup. You want to scream. Instead, you dig your nails into the straw mattress and bite your lip until it bleeds. You push again and again and again. There's an open debate among modern historians about how dangerous childbirth actually was in the Middle Ages. Some argue the danger is overstated, that women were tougher, birth was more natural, and community support helped reduce risk. Others, less optimistic, point to the horrifying number of deaths from hemorrhaging, sepsis, obstructed labour, and a general lack of hygiene. You tend to side with the latter, especially now that you've watched the midwife wipe her hands on her apron and then reach straight back inside you. You scream this time, loud, guttural. Everyone in the cottage flinches. The dog runs out. Your mother whispers a prayer under her breath. Then finally a shift. The midwife grabs your thigh, shouts, "Now!" and you push with everything you have left. It feels like you're breaking open, splitting along a seam you didn't know existed. And then, suddenly, it's over. A cry, high-pitched, wet and angry. Your baby is here. The midwife lifts the squirming, blood-covered creature into the air like a prize pig. It's a girl, small, purple and perfect in that horrifying, wrinkly newborn way. She wraps the baby in a linen cloth that's only slightly stained from something else, ties off the cord with a bit of twine, and places her gently on your chest. You sob, not from joy, not yet, just from sheer exhaustion and the overwhelming relief of not being dead. Then the afterbirth comes, sliding out of you like a second squishier baby. No one cheers for that part. It smells like iron and old meat. The midwife inspects it carefully, making sure nothing's left behind. If even a small piece remains inside you, it could fester, kill you. Quietly and slowly over the next few days. You've seen it happen. The bleeding doesn't stop. It never does. Not right away. You lie back and let the women clean you, using cloths dipped in wine, herbs packed between your legs, and your thighs trembling with every movement. You've torn, of course. Not that anyone says the word. It's just understood. The midwife might sew you if she has thread. Otherwise, it'll heal naturally, which is medieval code for pain for weeks. But your daughter is here, alive, breathing, loud, Someone takes her so you can record. You lie back, eyes closed, hands limp at your sides. The room is quiet now. The women begin to whisper again, not out of fear, but routine. They clean the sheets. Collect the bloodied cloths, boil more water. Life continues. You're not out of the woods yet. Puerperal fever is common. Infection could set in by morning. You'll bleed for weeks. Your milk may or may not come. But for tonight, you've survived. You've endured the most brutal gauntlet your body will ever face. You're a medieval woman. You've given birth without a doctor, without painkillers, without hope of a hospital. And you did it while lying on straw in a room where someone once churned butter. You close your eyes and drift into a sleep so deep it feels like death. But it's not. Not tonight. You lived. Your tooth comes loose mid-bite. One moment you're gnawing on a hunk of tough bread, the next you feel something shift in your jaw, an alarming wobble, like a cartwheel on the verge of rolling off. You pause, tongue the spot, and feel the unmistakable give of enamel that's no longer loyal. You sigh. Set the bread down and wiggle the offending tooth gently until it pops free into your hand. There's no blood. That part came and went weeks ago. It's been rotting slowly, steadily, and now it's finally given up. You hold the tooth like a strange prize, bone white at the tip, dark and crumbly at the root. You could keep it, maybe tie it to a string as a charm. People say a lost tooth brings luck, though not necessarily to the person who lost it. You tuck it into your apron pocket anyway. Why not? At least it's not stuck in the bread again. That's always awkward. Tooth loss is common, expected even. You're not even 30, and you've already lost 3 molars, 1 incisor, and most of your dental confidence. You can still chew, mostly on the left side, but every meal is a gamble. Soft foods are your best friend. Anything crunchy is suspicious, anything chewy is pure chaos. You once lost a chunk of tooth while eating dried pears. Pests. Nothing is safe. Toothaches are worse. They start as a dull throb behind your cheekbone, a low, rhythmic complaint that escalates into a pounding, relentless storm. You try not to let it show. Pain is weakness, and weakness is dangerous. But when it gets bad, when you can't sleep or think or speak without crying, you go see the tooth man. He's not a dentist. There are no dentists. He's just a blacksmith's cousin with strong hands and a set of terrifying metal tools. You sit on a stool, grip the edge with white knuckles, and open your mouth. He doesn't ask if you're ready. He just reaches in with iron tongs, twists once, and yanks. The pain is white-hot and instant. Your vision swims, your mouth floods with blood. You scream or try to. It comes out like a strangled bleat. Then it's over. The tooth is gone. Your face is numb. You can't feel anything except the salty burn of iron and shame. The healing takes time. There are no stitches, no antiseptics. Just cloth pressed against the wound and a prayer that it doesn't fester. You rinse with wine if you have it, salt water if you don't. Sometimes you pack the hole with herbs, sage, thyme, anything to dull the throb and keep the flies away. Some women chew cloves for the pain. Others pack the cavity with garlic or mashed onion. You've heard of someone using mashed leeches. You try not to think about that. One woman swore by urine mouthwash. You didn't even ask if she meant her own. There's also the matter of breath. You can taste your own decay sometimes, a sour, coppery tang that lingers no matter what you chew. Parsley helps, so does chewing fennel seeds, mint, or even pieces of pine resin. Anything to keep from smelling like you've been gnawing on corpses, which given your tooth count is a fair assumption. And yet despite the rot and the risk, you still try to smile. Smiling is social currency. A tight-lipped grin is polite. A toothy one is brave. You learn to laugh without opening your mouth fully, to tilt your head just so to keep the worst of it hidden. No one expects perfection, but blackened stumps and oozing sores are hard to ignore. You've seen women with abscesses so swollen they couldn't speak. Their jaws puffed up like they were hiding eggs. Sometimes the swelling drains, sometimes it spreads, sometimes they just stop showing up. Fringe fact, some noble women dye their teeth black on purpose. It's a mark of wealth in certain places. Proof you can afford sugar. You can't afford sugar, but you've got black teeth anyway, so you suppose you're ahead of the fashion curve, just without the pearls or the silk. Modern scholars like to debate whether medieval people really had such bad teeth. Some argue that the lack of refined sugar meant people actually had better oral health than you'd expect. Others point out that bread often contained ground grit from stone mills, which wore teeth down like sandpaper. You're pretty sure both are true. Your teeth didn't rot from candy. They eroded from chewing rocks 3 times a day. There's a merchant in town who sells a tooth powder, ash, crushed bones, and salt. He swears it strengthens enamel. You tried it once, it burned, and afterward, your gums bled so much you thought you were dying. You weren't. You just had weak gums, or bad luck, or possibly both. There's also the tooth charmers, women who recite verses while pressing cool stones to your jaw. They say words older than Latin and promise relief. You went to one once, desperate. She waved a feather over your head and whispered into your mouth. You didn't feel better, but your tooth stopped hurting. 2 days later, it fell out. You still don't know if that was the spell or just timing. Tonight, after the loose tooth incident, you rinse your mouth with weak beer and press a warm cloth to your cheek. You poke at the new gap with your tongue, trying to ignore the metallic taste. Your jaw aches. Your pride aches more. You lie down and try to sleep, but the pulsing in your gum keeps time with your heartbeat. Eventually you give up, get up, and chew a bit of clove. The taste is sharp, numbing, bitter, but it works a little. And in this world, a little is more than most can ask for. You're holding a ceramic flask full of someone else's urine. That's right, freshly collected, still warm if you're unlucky, and now swirling gently as you walk carefully toward the apothecary's cottage like you're delivering something sacred. Because in a way you are. This isn't just waste. It's a diagnostic tool, a medical marvel, a golden goblet of truth that, in the right hands, can supposedly reveal everything from a common cold to a cursed womb. You're skeptical, of course, but also desperate. Your sister's been sick for days, pale, bloated, dizzy, and sighing dramatically enough to be suspected of romantic longing. But just in case it's not swooning, you've brought her morning urine to the village piss prophet. That's what they call him. Not to his face, of course. To his face, he's Master Severin. And he has a chart covered in tiny painted jars and something he insists is a trained eye. The room smells like strong herbs, damp parchment, and faintly of pickled onions. You set the flask down on his wooden counter, where it joins a growing collection of similar containers, all labelled with bits of parchment tied to their necks with string. He holds it up to the light, swirls it gently, then tilts it back and forth, as if examining a rare wine. Mildly cloudy, he says, peering at it with one eye closed. Slight sediment. No froth. This is good. You don't know if that's true, but you nod like it is. He places a hand on the chart hanging beside him. It shows 20 different coloured samples. Amber, straw, cloudy, red-tinged, black, concerning coy, and something alarmingly green. Each is linked to an ailment. Hot liver, cold womb, melancholy, poisoned spleen, nervous blood. There's a whole category called moonstruck, which you suspect is just code for this person is weird. He continues his analysis with great seriousness. Temperature, viscosity, even smell. Yes. He uncorks the flask and gives it a sniff like he's evaluating perfume. You try not to gag. You fail. The patient, he declares at her last, has an imbalance of humours. Too much phlegm, possibly cold blood, likely the chills of the womb. He writes something down with a goose feather and nods with satisfaction. You're not sure how he got all that from pee, but this is medicine in your time. Diagnosing illness is as much performance as science. And while most people can't explain what humours are, they believe in them absolutely. Your body, according to popular theory, is made up of 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. They have to be in balance like a badly tuned lute. If one gets too strong, you fall ill, or go mad, or die. So the idea that your sister's cold womb could be causing her headaches, perfectly logical. Master Severin prescribes a warming tonic, wine boiled with ginger, cinnamon, and dried goat liver. He also suggests keeping a heated brick between her thighs. You write this down with a charcoal nub, then pay him with 2 eggs and a promise to bring more if she recovers. If not, well, he did his best. There's a folk belief in your village that urine can predict pregnancy. If the sample turns cloudy or develops a skin-like film, it means the woman is expecting. There's also the wheat and barley test. You pour a woman's urine over seeds and see which sprouts. If the barley grows, it's a boy. If the wheat grows, a girl. If nothing grows, she's just bloated. You tried it once. Everything died, including your hope. You've also heard of women using urine for love magic. Write your name in it and bury it beneath a full moon. Or collect the urine a bit of your beloved, mix it with honey and wine and serve it to them. Yes, that's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. You stay away from those spells. Some things should not be bottled. Of course, not all practitioners rely on urine alone. The truly ambitious combine it with astrology. Mars is in retrograde, so your liver is inflamed. Your urine is pale, and it's Tuesday. Drink nettle tea. It sounds absurd, but at this point you've seen people recover from worse after weirder. Fringe fact, some early physicians even tasted the stuff. That's right, tasted. A bit on the tongue, swirled like wine, then declared sweet or salty, flat or pungent. You once watched a monk do this and immediately lose his lunch. He called it a revelation. You call it disgusting. The idea that your body tells its secrets through waste is strangely intimate. You begin to see urine not just as a byproduct, but as a kind of medieval diary. Your daily intake, your fears, your sins, it all leaves the body somehow, and someone's job is to read it like scripture. That night you give your sister the tonic and help her lie down with a warm brick wrapped in cloth. She grimaces, drinks the bitter liquid, and closes her eyes. Her breathing eases. Maybe it's the herbs. Maybe the placebo effect. Maybe the fire has just warmed the cottage enough to calm her nerves. You don't question it. And while she sleeps, you take her flask of used medicine and empty it into the garden, where it joins a dozen other strange offerings to the soil. The earth doesn't care, neither do you. You wonder if centuries from now people will look back at your little village and marvel at the way you diagnosed illness with nothing but colour, blood cloud and cellulose. They'll call it primitive, barbaric, foolish, but when someone's sick and your options are limited to boiling weeds or praying harder, even a flask of pee starts to look like science. It starts with a little itch on your arm. No big deal. You scratch it absently while tending to the fire, thinking it's just a bit of dry skin or maybe a stray bit of hay, but then there's another itch, and another, one on your neck, one on your inner thigh. And now you're scratching like your body is trying to crawl out of its own skin. You freeze, stare at your hands. Is it just fleas? Or is it that again? You don't want to bubble. You don't even want to think the word. But deep down, you know. You've known since the boil showed up 2 days ago, hot and angry at the base of your armpit. You tried ignoring it, rubbed vinegar on it, said a little prayer to Saint Sebastian, because apparently he's good for this sort of thing. But it's bigger now, throbbing. Your arm barely moves. You feel hot and cold at the same time. The dog keeps growling when you get near him. The chickens have stopped following you around. Even the cat won't sleep on your feet anymore. That's never a good sign. You tell yourself it's just a rash. You've had those before, or maybe a fever from working too hard. Everyone's tired right now, everyone's itching. The midwife said the fleas are especially bad this season. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just bugs and heat and poor sleep. But your cousin had that same look last spring, just before she died. The village called it the sweating sickness, the hot death, the pestilence. Some still whisper the plague, though no one dares say it aloud anymore. There's a quiet superstition that naming it gives it power, like it's a demon crouching just outside the door waiting to be acknowledged. You scratch your arm again, even though you've already broken the skin. You try not to glance at the boil. It's angry now. Dark purple at the centre, surrounded by red like bruised fruit. You swear it's pulsing. You pull your sleeve down and pretend it isn't there. This isn't new. You've dealt with sickness before. There are always things in the air, in the water, in the meat that's sat out too long. But this is different. You know when your body is simply tired, and you know when it's screaming, and right now, it's screaming. You remember the protocols, vague as they are. Drink strong vinegar, burn dried herbs, sage, rosemary, juniper. Wear a nosegay pinned to your bodice. Breathe through linen soaked in rosewater. Avoid eye contact with the obviously dying. Say your prayers. Wash your hands with ash and hope. The ash part you've done. Your palms are grey with it. Doesn't seem to help. There's also the matter of sin, because if you're ill, some believe it's because you deserve to be. You've offended God by looked too long at a man you shouldn't have. Whispered blasphemy in your sleep. Neglected your fast. Gossip, they say, can rot your soul and maybe your armpits too. You try to remember your last confession. It's been a while. You'd go now, but the priest hasn't left his cottage in days. You suspect he's sick too, or hiding, or both. That night the itching gets worse. Your whole body hums with discomfort. The sheets feel like they're made of straw and punishment. You can't find a position that doesn't hurt. The boil has grown. It's the size of a pigeon egg now, and just as warm. You press a cool cloth to it and hiss. The pain shoots down your ribs like lightning. You don't tell anyone. Not yet. You're not ready for the stares, the prayers muttered, just a bit too loudly. The neighbours avoiding your doorstep. The children making signs of the cross when you walk by. You've seen how they treat the sick. Once the boil bursts, you'll be marked. Maybe carried to the edge of town, maybe locked in your cottage, maybe worse. Historians still debate whether every boil meant plague. There were other illnesses, of course, other infections. Not every pustule was death incarnate. But in your world, there's no way to tell, no microscope, no test, just a feeling, a guess, a fear that grows as fast as the swelling under your arm. You try the onion poultice, you slice it thin, layer it with honey, and press it to the skin. It stings, it smells, you look ridiculous. But if the stories are true, it draws out the poison. You sleep with it in place, hoping to wake up cured. You don't. The fever comes in waves. Your body burns, then freezes. Your fingers tremble. Your mouth is dry no matter how much water you drink. Your heart races. Everything sounds distant, like the world is behind a door you can't open. And through it all, the itching. The endless, unbearable, crawling itch. Your skin feels like it's alive with invisible insects. You scratch until you bleed, and still it doesn't stop. You manage to stagger to the hearth, toss more herbs into the fire. The smoke rises, bitter, medicinal, useless. You breathe it in anyway. You remember something the old healer once said, if you feel the itch before the pain, you've still got a chance. You cling to that. Maybe it's true. Maybe if you keep scratching, you'll stay ahead of the sickness. Maybe this boil is just a boil. Maybe you're just being dramatic, but deep down, you know, because this isn't your first plague season, and you know the signs. The dogs start howling at dawn, that's when the village notices. A woman knocks on your door and calls your name with a voice that's far too cheerful to be natural. You don't answer. You lie perfectly still, pretending to be asleep, hoping the world will forget you exist just long enough for the fever to pass. Because in the medieval world, sometimes the only cure is silence. Waiting, denial and scratching, always scratching. You smell yourself before you even open your eyes. It's that thick, salty, slightly sour musk that announces your presence long before you walk into a room. Not that it's unusual, everyone smells. Your mother smells like smoke and onions. Your neighbour smells like old turnips and wet wool. The blacksmith smells like iron and despair. But you smell like you. A concentrated blend of body odour, labour, anxiety, and the inside of your one surviving pair of boots. It's not great. You used to notice it more, back when you were younger. Back when there was still some faint glimmer of hope that you could avoid becoming one of the stinky women in the village. But over time, you've learned to accept that smell is part of life. You sweat, you toil, you marinate. And unless you're rich enough to spend your days in silk gowns and imported perfume, you're going to walk around with a scent profile that could knock over a cow. Still, you try. You start the morning the usual way. A splash of cold water to the face, a sniff of your underarms to assess the damage, and then a frantic search for your little bundle of herbs. It's a pouch made of worn linen, stuffed with dried rosemary, lavender, sage, and whatever else you managed to steal from the garden before the goats got to it. You crush the contents between your fingers, warm them in your palm, and then press the bundle firmly into your armpits. It helps. For an hour, maybe 2. After that, you're back to the full funk. You've tried other things, rubbing yourself with vinegar-soaked cloths, dusting your underarms with flour or powdered chalk. Once you even tried packing your pits with fresh mint. That was a mistake. The mint gave you a rash, and you spent 2 days walking like you were smuggling bees. There's a woman in the next village who swears by crushed sage and pig fat. She makes little cakes of it and presses them under her arms like some kind of medieval deodorant stone. You tried that too. It melted, slowly, tragically, right in the middle of the market day. By noon you were greased like a roast and smelled like you'd fallen into a pot of meat stew. Children followed you. Dogs licked your ankles. Some women just give up. They go full natural, embracing the stench like it's a badge of honour. God gave us sweat for a reason, they say. Better to stink and live than to be vain and cursed. Maybe they're right. But you've seen what happens when someone really lets go. There was a girl, Marta, who stopped bothering altogether. By midsummer, no one would sit next to her. Even the rats kept their distance. There's also the issue of clothes. You can scrub your skin raw, but it won't matter if your dress smells like it's been soaking in swamp juice since Easter. Your one wool gown has absorbed every drop of sweat you've ever produced. No matter how many times you hang it in the wind, beat it with a stick, or stuff it with dried herbs, it still smells like hot breath and fermented onions. And yet, you keep wearing it. What choice do you have? You do what you can, you rotate your underlayers. You burn sage in your sleeping corner. You sit near the open window when possible, and you try, when you remember, to not raise your arms too high in public. The worst is during the summer. When the sun is high, the air is still, and your entire body turns into a bubbling cauldron of sweat. Your back, your legs, even the inside of your elbows, everything leaks. You leave sweat prints on benches, and your thighs make that awful sound when they peel away from wooden stools. One particularly hot day, your shift stuck to you so tightly you had to peel it off with the help of 2 friends and a bucket of cold beer. People used to say sweat was healthy, that it purged toxins, that it kept the devil from nesting in your skin. You're not sure about the theology, but it certainly keeps everyone else at a distance. There's a monk nearby who brews herbal pastes for the cleanliness of the soul and scent. He uses ground juniper, tree bark, vinegar, and something he refuses to name. You tried it once. It worked. Sort of. Your underarms were less offensive for about a day, then the rash kicked in. You haven't been back. And of course, some people try to cover the smell. Not mask it, no, cover it. They dump oils and flower water over their unwashed bodies and hope for the best. The result? A heady, cloying mix of decaying roses and deep, sour sweat. One noble woman who visited your village wore something called musk oils. She left a trail of fragrance so strong you could follow it like breadcrumbs. By the end of the day, the priest fainted during evening prayer. It's not just women either. Men reek, often worse. But no one cares. Their odour is seen as masculine, robust, hearty, even desirable. A man who smells like a pigsty is just a hard worker. A woman who smells the same? A pariah. You've watched the hypocrisy unfold daily. You once bathed and changed your shift just to be told you still smelled like potatoes. You cried. Then you cooked potatoes anyway. There's a fringe belief floating around that if you sweat too much it means you're leaking out your soul, that the body is dripping its virtue into the ground. Some women start wearing extra cloth at the underarms to absorb their blessings. You tried that too. It moulded. It smelled worse. Modern historians like to debate how smelly the medieval world really was. Some argue that people were so used to the sense of life, animal, wood smoke, sweat, that they didn't even notice. Others insist that masking body odour with herbs and oils was a sign of refinement. Both might be true, but from where you sit, damp and aromatic, you think the truth lies somewhere in the pit of your own elbow. Tonight, as the fire dies down, you lie under your blanket, one arm flung above your head. The smell wafts up gently, you breathe it in, not even flinching. It's your scent now, your signature, your warning label and your coat of arms. You've made peace with it, kind of, because in this world perfume is optional. Sweat, non-negotiable. You're squatting in a field with your skirts hiked up around your hips, surrounded by waist-high grass and a chorus of indifferent crickets. This is not a moment of peace. This is a moment of necessity, because nature doesn't care that you're a woman. When you need to go, you go, and in the medieval world that means finding the nearest secluded patch of earth, praying no one walks by and hoping your aim is decent enough that you don't soak your only shift. Again, there are no toilets, no outhouses, unless you're at a monastery or an unusually progressive manor house. In town you might find a communal latrine, but it smells like 1,000 sins and looks worse. Most people, especially women, just relieve themselves wherever they can, behind barns, beside hedges, or into a chamber pot if they're lucky enough to be at home. You've mastered the art of peeing silently in the dark, of pulling your layers aside with one hand and balancing precariously on your heels like a suspicious duck. Of course, none of this is hygienic. When you're done, there's nothing to wipe with except maybe a smooth stone, a handful of moss, or a scrap of cloth you've reused far more times than is polite to admit. The cloth, by the way, has been rinsed dozens of times in a cold stream and dried over the fire, but it hasn't felt clean since last summer. Still, it's better than grabbing a leaf and hoping it's not poison ivy. You learned that lesson the hard way. The real challenge isn't the urination, it's the other end. When you need to do that in the middle of the day, it's a whole event. You scout for privacy, you check the wind. You dig a little hole if you're trying to be civilized, or at least make it look like you tried. And afterward, if you don't have a rag on you, it's moss or hay or maybe your sleeve, if it's already disgusting enough. You once saw a woman use an old bread crust. She said it was symbolic. You never asked what of. At home, you have a chamber pot. a generous name for a battered clay bowl that lives under your bed and is emptied every morning into the garden or into the communal waste pit behind the cottages. That pit, by the way, is a festering horror. You avoid it. You send the children, or someone else's children. Sometimes waste is collected and used to fertilise fields. Human waste, night soil they call it. You've helped spread it before, trying not to breathe through your nose. It's a practical cycle. What you eat eventually feeds what you'll eat next. You try not to think about that when chewing turnips. There are towns with gutter systems, crude trenches running alongside the streets where people toss slop, urine, and whatever else they're done with. These channels reek in summer. Children fall into them. Rats thrive in them, the dogs love them, you do not. You walk wide circles around the worst ones, and when the rain comes and floods the filth straight through your doorway, you take it as a message from God. A reminder. Of what, you're not sure. Probably humility. Men have it easier. Of course they do. They can relieve themselves standing up behind trees, even off the side of bridges. You've seen a man urinate into a fire just to impress someone. It did not. But the freedom they enjoy makes you furious sometimes. Especially when you're forced to hold it through an entire religious procession, thighs clenched, while a priest drones on about moral purity and bladder control becomes a spiritual discipline. On holy days, when the church is full and the services stretch for hours, you've seen women slip out discreetly, fake a fainting spell, just to squat behind the graveyard wall. One older woman always carries a flask of water to pour into her lap, so if she loses control, she can pretend she spilled something. You think she's brilliant? During your bleeding days, yes, those days, the whole bathroom routine gets even more grim. There are no sanitary products, just rags, old cloths, maybe a bit of moss if you're desperate. You tie it into your underlayers with string, or tuck it between your thighs and pray it stays in place. You bleed into your shift, into your bedding, into your shoes once, though that was a particularly bad month. The smell is inescapable. You do your best, wash the cloths, boil them when you can, but the metallic tang of blood mixed with sweat and earth follows you. You keep your distance from others, not because they judge, but because you're already judging yourself. You've internalized the shame, everyone has. There's an old superstition that women shouldn't enter gardens or milk cows while bleeding, or the plants will wither and the milk will spoil. Once, during your time of the month, you accidentally stepped over a patch of basil and the whole village blamed you when it turned yellow. You still think it was the goats. Scholars argue over whether medieval people were dirty or just differently clean. They had their own systems, their own routines. Bathing happened when it could. Washing was daily but often symbolic. And relieving yourself? That was just part of life. But there's no denying it lacked the sparkle of modern plumbing. There's a fringe theory you read once. Well, heard, since reading's a rare luxury, that some noble ladies had their waste whisked away in fancy pots with embroidered cloths and perfume-laced powders to mask the scent. You'd like to believe it. It sounds decadent, but also incredibly silly. Waste is waste, no matter how dainty the bowl. Tonight, you squat behind the shed under a sliver of moonlight, knees aching, skirt bunched beneath your chin. You hear a rustle in the dark, a badger or maybe just your neighbour. Either way, you hurry. You do your business, wipe with what you can and make your way back inside. Your shift smells faintly of vinegar, sage, and something you'd rather not identify. But it's warm, and the fire's still glowing, and no one saw you, which in the medieval world counts as a perfect bathroom experience. You're awake before the sun again, not because you want to be, but because your body has decided sleep is a luxury you don't deserve. Your back aches, your legs twitch, and there's that one persistent flea hopping somewhere near your ankle like it owns the place. You shift beneath your blanket and stare at the thatched ceiling above you, trying to remember the last time you truly rested. Not just closed your eyes, but rested. Slept without itching, snoring, or someone coughing beside you like they were trying to expel a lung. Welcome to medieval bedtime. It's not that people in your time don't value sleep, they do. You just have to work with what you've got, and what you've got is a straw mattress, a wool blanket, and a level of discomfort that would make a monk weep. Your bed is shared, of course, sometimes with your siblings, sometimes with your children, sometimes just with a cousin or a neighbour staying the night. Privacy is a fantasy. Warmth is everything. So you pile in, limb over limb, shoulder to shoulder, snoring in unison like a barnyard symphony. You sleep in your shift because it's cold and you need every layer you can get. Some nights, if it's truly bitter, you sleep in your dress too, you've woken up with your braid frozen to the wall. Once you found a small icicle hanging from the underside of the windowsill. You named it Margaret and watched it melt in the morning sun while trying to defrost your fingers. You dream when you can sleep of odd things, of bread with no mould, of clothes that don't itch, of sleeping alone on a pile of feathers without the smell of goats wafting in from the other side of the wall. But then someone shifts beside you, steals half the blanket, and you're back to reality. Elbows in your ribs, knees in your spine, and that one flea back for round 2. The mattress is straw. Let's be clear, used straw. Flattened, itchy, probably crawling with things you don't want to think about. You try to fluff it, redistribute it, maybe turn it over once a month if you're feeling fancy. But no matter what you do, you always end up with a sharp piece of stalk stabbing you somewhere sensitive. One time a mouse made a nest inside it. You still haven't fully recovered, and the blanket, it's wool, thick, scratchy and heavy enough to pin you in place. You once tried to wash it. It shrank, smelled worse, and took a week to dry. Now you just shake it out, beat it against a tree and pretend that counts. Bathing before bed? Maybe once a month. And even then it's not for sleep, it's for show, or illness, or holy days. Usually you go to bed carrying every scent and particle from the day. Sweat, smoke, herbs, grease, possibly a bit of cow dung. It's all part of the bedtime bouquet. Pillows are rare. You stuff an old linen sack with rags or feathers if you're lucky, maybe dried grass if you're not. You shape it into something that vaguely supports your head and try not to think about the mites. Once you fell asleep on a bundle of lavender, it made your whole face smell nice for a day, and you still think about that night as the peak of your luxury. Noise is constant. The cottage creaks, someone always snores, a baby cries, the wind whistles through the gaps in the wall, dogs bark, chickens complain. If you're in a town, you get the joy of drunk neighbours yelling at each other, or someone being politely chased by guards. One time you swear you heard someone singing to their pig. At midnight, you've learned to fall asleep despite it, or maybe because of it. Silence feels unnatural, eerie. If it's too quiet, you get suspicious. You've woken up in a panic before, heart racing, because it was quiet, and that could only mean something was wrong. Fringe fact. Some people in your time believe that sleep is dangerous, that your soul wanders while you dream, that evil spirits can slip into your mouth if you sleep on your back. You've since learned to sleep curled on your side, one hand over your mouth just in case. Not because you believe it, but because someone once told you a story about a woman who woke up with a demon in her throat and couldn't talk for a week. You're not taking chances. Also, there's segmented sleep. People talk about first sleep and second sleep and waking in the middle of the night for an hour or two before drifting off again. During that time, some people pray, some tend the fire, some make more children. You mostly just lie there, scratching at your arms and wondering if you can sneak outside to pee without freezing solid. Sometimes you light a candle and sit quietly, staring into the flame. It's peaceful in a way. A rare moment of stillness when no one's asking for bread or bandages or to borrow your last clean spoon. You like the dark so long as it doesn't come with whispers or strange scratching behind the walls. Modern folks would be horrified. No duvets, no bedtime routines, no chamomile tea, just bodies piled together, bugs in your blanket, and the looming threat of waking up with frostbite or a mysterious rash. But you're used to it. Comfort is relative, rest is relative, survival is the priority. Tonight, you lie on your straw mattress, the smell of smoke and sheep lingering in the air. You pull the blanket up to your chin, tuck your cold feet under your sister's legs, and close your eyes. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, someone mutters in their sleep. The flea bites your ankle again. You fall asleep anyway, because in your world, bedtime isn't peaceful, but it's yours. You wake to the sound of coughing, deep, wet, rattling like someone's wringing out a sponge inside their chest. It's your neighbour, or maybe your mother, or maybe it's you can't tell anymore. Everyone is always coughing. It's practically a greeting. Good morning, followed by a hacking fit. How are you? Answered with a phlegmy snort. You've started judging people's health by how red their faces get when they wheeze. Welcome to medieval respiratory wellness, or rather, the complete absence of it. You sit up slowly, blanket clinging to your skin, and look around the room. The air is thick, not warm, not cosy, but heavy with soot, smoke, and a fine layer of dust that never fully settles. There's no ventilation. The chimney, if you even have one, is choked with years of build-up and more wishful thinking than actual airflow. The hearth smoulders constantly, filling the cottage with that special aroma, half firewood, half slow suffocation. Your nose is always running. Your throat is always raw. You don't remember what it feels like to breathe without tasting the fire. You cough into your sleeve, trying to muffle the sound, then reach for the earthenware cup beside your bed. It holds a cold herbal tea steeped from thyme and elderflower. Meant to soothe the lungs, though mostly it just tastes like old socks. You sip anyway. Anything to keep the rattle in your chest from becoming a full-on wheeze. The truth is, you probably have some form of chronic bronchitis, or asthma, or the early stages of tuberculosis. There's no way to know for sure. Diagnosis is mostly just creative guesswork. If you're lucky, people say you've got a chill in the lungs. If you're unlucky, they say you're cursed. And everyone has a cure. Your aunt insists on badger fat boiled with rosemary. Your neighbour swears by dried toad powder dissolved in wine. The old man down the lane keeps offering you a mustard plaster for your chest, even though last time it gave you blisters. You tried sleeping with onions tied to your feet once. It did nothing for your lungs, but everything for keeping people away from you. There's no shortage of smoke in your life. The hearth burns year-round, whether for warmth, cooking or ritual. Candles smoke, torches smoke. The air inside your home is a permanent haze. You've seen sunlight catch it in the right angle, turning your one window into a golden fog screen. It would be beautiful if it weren't slowly killing you. Even outside, the air isn't fresh. There's the constant smell of manure, mould and animals, wet fur, hot breath, and whatever the goats decided to roll in today. You breathe it all in, all day, every day, and then you wonder why your chest feels like it's full of gravel. You know better than to complain. Everyone's lungs are struggling. The blacksmith's apprentice can't go 5 minutes without hacking up something alarming. The midwife's cough has a wheeze to it now. The priest doesn't preach anymore, just croaks from the pulpit while clutching a handkerchief soaked through with something yellow. You remember when old Ansel died last winter? He coughed for a month, got quieter, then stopped. They buried him with a sprig of thyme and a blanket soaked in vinegar. Just in case, no one ever mentioned the word consumption, but they were all thinking it. They always are. Fringe fact. Some people believe that fairies steal your breath in the night, that coughing is a sign they've taken a piece of your soul. You once woke up mid-choke, gasnit, and wondered if that was true. Now you sleep with a clove of garlic under your pillow, not because you believe in fairies, but because you're desperate. There's also the fire test, where a woman waves a burning stick near your mouth to see if the smoke draws out the illness. It's as terrible as it sounds. One girl burned her fringe off. Another got a nosebleed so severe they called for the priest. You declined your turn. The idea of germs doesn't exist, not really. You know that being near the sick makes you sick too, but you frame it in terms of bad air or miasmas. Some people carry posies to sniff when near someone coughing. Others hang herbs from their ceilings or rub camphor on their chests. You tried all of it. Still the cough lingers. Historians today debate whether people really lived in such constant respiratory distress. Some argue that the open air of the countryside balanced out the smoke indoors. Others point to archaeological evidence, lungs with soot, skeletons with rib damage, and say yes, it was as awful as it sounds. You don't need a study, you live it. Today, you feel it deep in your chest, like something sitting on your ribs, pressing down. You take shallow breaths and hope it passes. If not, you'll try the steam tent again. It's a pot of hot water, a rag over your head, and a good 20 minutes of sweating and coughing until you're lightheaded. Sometimes it works, sometimes you pass out. You know you should rest, stay warm, keep hydrated. But you also have to fetch water, tend the fire and wrangle the chickens, who are in one of their demonic moods again. So you cough, spit and keep moving. Tonight, after everyone else is asleep, you sit by the hearth and breathe in the smoke, because what else can you do? You rub balm on your chest, just old lard and mint, and tuck yourself beneath the blanket, hoping you don't wake up gasping. You think about the air and how little control you have over it, about how every breath feels like both a gift and a gamble, and still you breathe. Because that's what you do. The mirror is a small warped bit of polished metal, nailed unevenly to the wall beside your bed. It reflects light only when the sun hits it just right, which is almost never, and even then, what it shows back at you is more suggestion than certainty. A vague oval of a face, hints of cheekbones, a smudge that might be your mouth. You lean in close now, squinting, trying to get a better look, though you're not entirely sure you want one, because your face doesn't lie anymore. It tells the full story, the dirt pressed into your pores like a second skin, the fine lines etched by stress and wind, the half-peeled scab on your chin from scratching at a pimple that overstayed its welcome. You see the faint bruising beneath your eyes, the chapped lips, the burst blood vessel on the side of your nose, possibly from sneezing, possibly from fate. Welcome to medieval skincare, bull. Which is to say there isn't any. You splash your face with cold water when you can, mostly because it wakes you up, not because you expect it to help. Soap is too precious to waste on skin, unless it's Sunday or you're trying to impress someone. Most of the time it's just you, water, and whatever scrap of linen is dryish enough to wipe your cheeks without giving you a new rash. There are some remedies, of course. Everyone has their favourite one. Your aunt rubs her face with egg whites to keep her skin tight as a goat's drum. Your neighbour swears by pig fat mixed with rose petals. You've tried honey and oat mash. Once. It dripped into your eyes and stuck your hair to your neck for 3 days. The chickens chased you. It was not your finest moment. You once heard of a noble woman who bathed her face in milk every morning like Cleopatra. That sounded luxurious until you realised you'd have to waste milk. In this economy, not a chance. So you stick with the basics. A little thyme if you have it, rubbed gently on your skin. A poultice of mashed calendula if something's inflamed. Mud when things get dire. And by mud, yes, you mean actual dirt. Wet, thick, and smeared across your forehead like you're preparing for war. Honestly, it works better than most things. Pimples come and go. When they stay, they bring friends. You've named some of them. One on your temple is Gregory. He's been with you for 3 harvests now. You think of him as a tenant. Others, like the angry red spot on your chin, are just passing raiders, painful, obnoxious, and likely to leave a scar. You try not to pick at them. You fail. Everyone fails. There's a perverse satisfaction in squeezing something that shouldn't be there, even if you know it will just scab, fester, and come back with reinforcements. The midwife once scolded you for it, said every spot you press is an open invitation to the devil. You pressed one anyway. You're still here. Some women cover their blemishes with white powder made from crushed chalk or lead. You've seen the noble girls with their ghostly faces and cracked cheeks. One rubbed so much white paint into her skin, it flaked off during dinner and landed in her soup. You would rather look blotchy than poisonous. Then there's body hair. You've got plenty. So does everyone. No razors, no wax, no shame. Some women pluck mostly their eyebrows or the hair on their chin. But you've never had the patience. You did try threading once. It ended in tears, blood, and a snapped thread to the eye. You hear rumours that certain spices can make your skin glow. Cinnamon, saffron, even turmeric if you can find it. The local herbalist sells a face wash made of vinegar and rosemary that he insists will make you look like a blushing bride. You bought some. It smelled like pickled soup and gave you a rash that resembled map of the Holy Land. You've since stopped listening to him. There's a fringe belief in your village that beauty is punishment, that to be born with a symmetrical face or clear skin is a sign that you owe something either to God or to men. That beauty draws demons. You've heard of women rubbing ash into their cheeks to dull their features, hoping to pass unnoticed. You've considered it, but you also remember the other side of that coin. Women mocked for looking unfeminine, too dark, too freckled, too large. Too small. Beauty is currency, and like any currency, it's unreliable. You've seen beautiful girls marry poorly. You've seen plain women become midwives and be loved like saints. Your face is neither here nor there. Average, perhaps. Capable. You don't glow. You don't dazzle. But you can carry firewood, and that counts for more in most situations. Modern scholars like to paint medieval people as dirty, diseased, unwashed creatures who never bathed and had no vanity. That's not quite right. People cared, they just lacked options. If you could afford perfumes and oils, you used them. If not, you improvised with herbs, smoke and prayer. You still care, but your version of pampering is sitting alone for 5 minutes and not having a chicken peck at your foot. Tonight, you light a single candle and study your reflection again. Your face is blotchy, tired, alive. You smear a little lavender oil under your nose, not because it does anything, but because it smells like something better. You rub thyme on a sore spot near your jaw. You dab away the sweat. You think for a moment about that noble woman and her milk, and you wonder if it worked. You hope not. Then you blow out the candle, lie down on your straw mattress, and press your cheek into the least scratchy spot on your blanket. Your skin will be what it is. Your face will age. It will freckle. It will weather. But it's yours, and it's honest. And in a world where your reflection is more rumour than truth, that's the best you can ask for. You've made it through another day. Barely. Your body aches in the quiet, heavy way that tells you you've survived. if not exactly thrived. The fires burned low, just embers now, glowing red beneath the blackened logs. The others are asleep, some snoring, some shifting, the occasional cough echoing through the dim. You lie there listening, not quite ready to drift off, because even in this world of fleas and filth, there's something oddly peaceful about this late hour. You think of everything your body endured today. The scratching, the scrubbing, the smells, the sores, the indignity of squatting behind a bush and the quiet triumph of not falling in. And somehow, despite it all, you're still here, still breathing, still human. Your life is not elegant, it's not perfumed or polished, it's raw and loud and hilariously messy, but it's yours. Every itch, every ache, every ridiculous medieval remedy you've tried and hated and maybe sort of loved in a weird masochistic way. The sweat-slick dresses, the strange herbal tinctures, the boiled wine and blessed garlic, the pimple named Gregory. And maybe that's the part that matters most. Not whether you were clean or sweet-smelling or modest, but whether you kept going, day after day, through plagues, blood, and bad teeth, with dignity, or at least with a decent sense of humour. So now, as the silence settles over your little cottage, and the fire gives one last crackle before settling in for the night, you let yourself relax, let your breath slow, let your limbs go soft. You scratch that one last flea bite behind your knee, and then you smile, because you are a medieval woman, and you are absolutely disgusting, but also kind of magnificent.